In 153, 22 years after the Dance of the Dragons, the last dragon known in Westeros died. Though she laid a clutch of eggs, the dragon had never thrived. Curiously, neither had any of the dragons hatched after the dance. There were still adult dragons in Westeros born before the dance that survived. Not many, but some, and they were strong and powerful in at least a few cases. But by 153, they were gone as well. So how did this come to be? That's not a very long time, right? Were there those who dreamt of a dragonless Westeros? And of those for whom the answer was yes, did they do anything about it? I'm sure plenty of people just had that thought, but we're talking about people who put it into action. Or did it happen for reasons outside of human control? Were there supernatural factors beyond comprehension that maybe we can just touch on a little bit or at least extrapolate? Or was it a combination of things? And if so, which things? The maesters are commonly suspected. And to be clear, my friends, this is not a theory that originated with fans. Well, I would say it didn't entirely originate with fans. It did entirely originate with fans at first. There were plenty of fans who suspected the maesters of killing the dragons before Marwyn the Mage expressed that belief on page, because Marwyn the Mage did that at the end of A Feast for Crows, and y'all are well aware that there were 3 books before that one. So it's a conspiracy theory, but it's a conspiracy theory believed by characters in the story and by parts of the fandom. So that puts it in a different category. And we have a smart fandom, y'all. That's something that I'd like to throw out there. You know, people figuring things out before they're spelled out more. I like that. But the maesters are not the only ones with motive here. There's flaws with Marwyn's theory, and there's other factors that he didn't consider, which, well, that's part of the flaws with his theories, but that doesn't eliminate his ideas, so we have to include them for sure. Is the end motive of getting rid of dragons, if that's what happened, to get rid of magic or to reduce it? That's a question that needs to be addressed here too, because do dragons actually bring magic, or does the magic bring dragons? A question we'll take on today is if killing dragons kills magic. Well, where did that idea come from in the first place? The world had dragons in it for thousands of years before it suddenly didn't. So where did the idea that getting rid of them would have an effect like that? Who could have experienced that prior to it happening, right? That's a bit of a conundrum, isn't it? So we have questions. It's a 3-way cultural battle that's tangible in Westeros that we're going to get into as well. Because magic is real. The realm of science is not happy with it. They're antagonistic towards it, at least as far as what we've been told. And there's dragons and magic, which is its own realm. But also there's the realm of faith. The 7 aren't big fans of the dragons. The High Septon, maybe not a big fan, whichever High Septon you're talking about. They were the big power in Westeros before the dragons, so they stand to gain something by them being gone. And of course, with all that, we have all this wrapped into a nice whodunit package, because if it wasn't the maesters, who was it, and why did they do it, and how? We need motive, and we need method. So we got a lot of stuff going on. The supernatural forces behind all of Planetos, dragons, mages, perhaps the biggest whodunit case in Westeros history. All that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome back, everybody. We are streaming live, as we so often do here, Monday at 3 o'clock Eastern. That is when our regular live streams happen. If there is a TV show in season, we modify that to Mondays at 6. You can always catch the episode afterwards, though, and regardless of when and where we recorded it, you can find it on YouTube in the unedited version, unless it's a scripted episode, in which case, hey, that's edited ahead of time. And all of our live streams get edited and put up on Spotify and every podcast platform where you can find podcasts. Every podcast platform, right? That's how that works. So, and if it's ad-free, you can listen to it on Patreon. That's where you get that. So thanks to those of you all supporting us and sharing the word and all that. Let's get to it. Also, a thank you to Good Queen Allie, Nina. She was on vacation this week, so no new blog post over on goodqueenallie.tumblr.com. But there's so much good stuff on there, even if you've read them all. Maybe time to do some rereading. Valar, reread goodqueenallie.tumblr.com. If you have questions for us, WesterosHistory@gmail.com is probably the simplest way to get in touch, but you can also email us on Patreon, even just by being a free member. You don't have to actually be a paid member to contact us there, or on any social media platform. We're pretty much everywhere. Here's a trivia question to get us started. How many eggs did the last dragon lay? Interesting question, huh? The answer is revealed in this. It'll get dropped if you're paying close attention. Maybe you already know. And the answer could be a trick question, right? It might be none. It could be. So now, those of you who are patrons might be familiar with our Parallel Lives trivia and exploration of parallel characters within A Song of Ice and Fire, whether they're in the same timeline or separated by hundreds or thousands of years. Something we did a lot of between 2018 and 2022. Yeah, we've been doing these since before George R. R. Martin was born, y'all. And they're a lot of fun. They were all on Twitter, and I don't really use Twitter anymore for reasons I think you probably all understand. So we're going to be recycling some of them and putting them on Patreon and making some new ones in the meantime. So if a lot of y'all don't know what I'm talking about, so just stay tuned and you'll see they're pretty fun little trivia comparisons. If those of y'all who are familiar, well, you know what you're getting into. It'll be fun to bring back that fun weekly thing.
To be clear, Patreon has rolled out something called Quips, which is in the mobile app, and anyone can see, not just people who support your Patreon. So they will be posted as quips. Very quippy.
Very quippy. Yeah, it's kind of like a timeline type of thing, I guess, like a
news feed.
A news feed, yeah,
it's like
it's
a
a lot
news
like
feed.
that. Yeah, so they're trying to move into that direction, which makes sense. I often find myself a little disconnected from the people I'm supporting on Patreon, so having a few more ways for connectivity makes some sense. But anyway, let's get to the topic at hand, The Last Dragon. It's kind of, we almost call this one The Last Dragons because, well, we're looking at them as a whole. However, the final one does have extra weight on it because, well, just think about this I've raised this topic as very supernatural and, a whodunit murder mystery kind of thing, but it's also very political because, think about being in Westeros as the last dragon is dying. What a weird thing to be living through. The Targaryens are like, everything's fine. It's that meme where the dog is staring forward with the stupid grin on his face and the house is on fire. That's a good metaphor because of the fire, especially. But what are they supposed to say to everybody? Like, yeah, it's fine. The dragons are dying off. Who cares, right? We're fine. Not a problem. We only have them for thousands of years and now we don't. Big deal, right? So yeah, it is. It creates this feeling, not just in King's Landing, although it would be stronger there, I suppose, but everywhere in Westeros. Like, what's going to happen now? What's going to happen? Is this going to change things? Like, things have been the same for a long time. Are we going back to pre-Aegon? Is the kingdom going to collapse into 7 kingdoms again? So there would be a lot of thoughts and it wouldn't be positive, a lot of fear. So that is a big part of this as well. Right. Now, the section headers. We have The Last Dragons, Lost Dragon Lore, The Magic or the Egg. Yes, it's like the chicken or the egg. Then we have The Dragonless Dragon Lords, Dragonless but not eggless, 9 Mages, What or Who Done It, and How to Kill a Dragon. Kind of like How to Train Your Dragon, but yeah, you get it. So just some basic questions we're going to seek to answer here today, other than the ones I've already pointed out in the intro. What do we know about the last dragons? What physical characteristics and other details like that? Why were the final dragons so weak? And what was there a reason for that? Is it just coincidence? Was there a bunch of factors for that? Is there one thing we can point to? Did someone kill them off? Or did it just kind of happen? And if it was an organization that killed them off, who was it? Why did they do it? And how did they do it? So when Daenerys hatched 3 dragons at the end of A Game of Thrones, we assume it was still the year 298. Maybe it was 299. Regardless, they were the first known to us since the year 153. That's, again, 22 years after the end of the Dance of the Dragons and the year that the last dragon died. Now, Dany's dragons are growing quickly. They're an example. Now, some of that is probably a little bit on the meta side because George scrapped the 5-year gap, and that was supposed to give the dragons some time to grow. But even with that in mind, the last dragon and her siblings or sibling got nowhere near the size of Dany's. So even if you take out the George needs them to grow faster aspect, it still doesn't align, which implies some other factors were in play. Now, if you don't like a comparison to the miraculous dragons born from stone, I get it, that might be different. But look at the dragons born a generation before these last ones. Look at 2 or 3 generations before. Nothing seemed to go wrong with them other than the civil war that was started in their name, but nothing untoward with their growth patterns or anything like that. So whatever happened was pretty sudden. So even taking away Dany's kind of unusual example that hadn't happened by that time, it still looks peculiar, doesn't it? The Last Dragons. We'll start with the dragons themselves and then work into the theories and all the other stuff surrounding it. And after that, we'll talk a little bit about what life was like maybe when they were gone. Like now that once that milestone was hit, how did people react? What was next, etc. Here's a famous and fun quote we return to every so often. It reminds us, as it often does, in terms as along with it informing us of other things, whatever we happen to be looking at it for, in this case, The Last Dragons. It reminds us that George had a lot of this planned out ahead of time, even if certain details maybe weren't. A lot of this groundwork was laid in the first few chapters. Quote,
"There were 19 skulls. The oldest was more than 3,000 years old, the youngest a mere century and a half. The most recent were also the smallest, a matched pair no bigger than mastiffs' skulls, and oddly misshapen, all that remained of the last 2 hatchlings born on Dragonstone. They were the last of the Targaryen dragons, perhaps the last dragons anywhere, and they had not lived very long."
Yet one of the 2 lived long enough to bear eggs. So there's a little something there. That's a little odd. I mean, animal kingdom, pretty widespread. You don't generally lay eggs or breed or anything like that when you aren't healthy. So that's maybe a little odd. But so this dragon maybe was sick, but not fully sick, or it's unusual. Definitely noteworthy. And how many others were born after the dance? We don't actually know. I thought when we started this episode we would have a more clear answer, but we don't know. We know that these last 2 hatchlings, these skulls are mentioned here, but perhaps there's another skull that Tyrion didn't include that maybe died 5 years earlier. Because these last 2, he doesn't say that in this quote. Well, he does. He calls them a matched pair. They're very similar. So that's why maybe he wasn't noting the third one that's also an example, but died 10 years before, but still after the dance, right? That would just kind of belabor the point. He wouldn't need to get into that. And Tyrion doesn't necessarily even know that level of detail, even though Tyrion is, of all the POVs, the one who seems to know the most about dragons. Now, we know that Prince Viserys' egg, for example, was one that did not hatch. Prince Viserys meaning the Viserys that became Viserys II, as in Aegon III's younger brother. And of course, Aegon III was the king during this time where the dragons died out. That's part of why he's called Aegon III the Dragonbane. So if these hatched dragons, these 2 odd mismatched or misshapen, oddly matched pair, if they were given to certain Targaryens, were they cradle eggs? They probably were. Which ones? Like, this is an interesting thing that we're missing some of this detail, whose dragons they belong to. We don't even have the dragons' names. That's not too strange. Honestly, we didn't have pretty much any of the young dragons' names for the dance until Fire and Blood. Like a lot of maybe World of Ice and Fire. Some of those dragons didn't even have names then. Like basically those were late in the game names, we'll say. So this is kind of the same meta pattern here. The names aren't super important maybe to historians. Maybe that's like remembering the name of a specific ship. Like this ship that led all the other ships. You can see why that might matter, but you could also see why it's not very important just to have the name of the ship. There were enough Targaryen dragons that maybe marking down the name of all the smaller ones didn't seem important. Some of them may have had temporary names. You know what I mean? Like they give a working name until the dragon rider decides what the real name is. take a little while. Name days are a thing in Westeros, right? You don't always name things right away. Maybe that applies to dragons too. So out of the 4 oldest children of Daeron the Young Dragon, who was the king after Aegon III, sorry, not Daeron's oldest children. Sorry, not Daeron this first, not oldest children, his siblings rather. Elena had her egg when she was an adolescent, so her egg wasn't one of the ones that hatched. Viserys' 3 children, we don't meaning Aemon, Aegon, Aemon the Dragonite, Aegon the Fourth, and Nerys. We don't really know. It could have been one of their 3. And Baela Targaryen gave her egg to her daughter Lena, and that egg hatched. We'll talk about that one later. That one was a bit of a horror show. And there's also Hightower daughters of Rhaena. So there's quite a few different people that could have had eggs, so we couldn't really narrow it down all the way. That's basically your list of candidates. But it also tells you, given that list of candidates, that's a lot of people that had eggs. And so far, we only know of these 2 or 3 that actually hatched. And like I said, one was a horror show. So it's pretty distinct. The pattern of dragons born before the dance seemed fine. Even one born during the dance morning, I mean, she never got large and older, and we don't know how she died, but she didn't seem to be stunted either. There's no description of her in that state. Maybe that came later and we never learned that, but as of now, there's no word on that. So it doesn't seem random, does it? None of the dragons born after the dance seem to have been healthy. All of the ones before it seemed fine. And if there were only 2 hatchlings, why not more? So that's a mystery too, if it was only the 2 hatchlings. So a lot of people have seen these skulls, the ones that Tyrion looked at. They used to be prominently displayed in the throne room. It was Robert who took them down and moved them to the basement. So historically speaking, that's only 20 years ago that they were put in the basement. Less than 20, really. So a lot of people saw them. A lot of people got to wonder about them. And people probably had thoughts along Tyrion's lines as to, gosh, what was the deal with those little ones and dying out young? What happened there? And almost more peculiar, I pointed out mourning the pink and black dragon that died within 23 years of her birth, roughly. That's a little less mysterious than, say, Silverwing. Silverwing flew off after the dance to live alone on a stony island. The cannibal. We don't know when for sure the cannibal died. I don't think it's easy to pin the death of either Silverwing or the cannibal on maesters, right? Like, that seems far-fetched. Why would they? Well, how would they, right? Like, are they poisoning stuffed dragons to make the cannibal eat that? Like, ooh, I can go eat that hatchling, and it's really just a plushie and filled with poison. Like, I don't, right? And Sheep Stealer, that's another one. I mean, that dragon flew off and hid in the Vale where no one lives except the burned men, apparently. So, honestly, I think the maesters are a little precise with a date they shouldn't be. And it's a pattern we've seen with other supernatural creatures. For example, World of Ice and Fire and people like Maester Luwin and others will say things like, the children of the forest have been dead for thousands of years. They'll say things like, the giants are extinct. They'll say things like, skin changing, if it was a thing, it probably was a thing. It doesn't happen anymore. All those are blatantly wrong, right? And they're not just wrong by a little. They're wrong. Like, the children died out thousands of years ago? That is way wrong, right? They're not even gone at all. That's let alone thousands of years ago. There's giants walking around at the wall right now, and the maesters still know that. So how are we supposed to be sure that they know for a fact Sheep Stealer died before 153? Now, it's a dragon. There'd be sightings, but this is a very remote area of the Vale where this dragon kind of lived kind of unknown for a long time, semi-unknown before she became famous. So sinking back into obscurity by being out of sight, out of mind, I can believe that. So we got to keep that in mind, that this one date at 153, it might not be 100% accurate. However, I am willing to believe that it's close because, yeah, I mean, no one seems to have spotted Silverwing or the cannibal or Sheep Stealer after these dates, at least no confirmed sighting, no sightings in large numbers. So it's probably not off by a lot. But the point is the same. That's several adult dragons that were also all dead by this, say, the 150s, if we're not going to use 153 as a precise date. I can believe humans killing the dragon Morning Light. I can believe dragons being killed as hatchlings. Heck, a 10-year-old could kill a hatchling. It doesn't take much to smash an egg, even a dragon egg. But killing Sheep Stealer and Silverwing and that cannibal, yeah, I really, really doubt the maesters did that. I kind of doubt humans did that. So that's a problem for all the theorizing here. Has to keep that in mind. So highly relevant as to the question of whether the death of dragons actually had an impact. Here we're going to get into a little bit of the question of, well, dragons, magic, dragons. What brings what? What's the association there? And here is a quote.
The last one perished during the reign of King Aegon III.
The last dragon in Westeros,
insisted Molander. The last dragon in Westeros was the last dragon, said Armin doggedly. That is well known.
No Dothraki present to chorus. It is known, because that really emphasizes the point when you got like someone standing behind you to say it is known. It's like having a hype man or woman, you know, but for facts. Anyway, Molander argues that the world is too big, Ashai too distant and mysterious, as well as being associated with dragons. To be sure, he says Old Town is not the world. And given the point I just made about how maesters have been wrong about these things, like right in front of our eyes multiple times, I'm with Molander. Even Dany says the same thing early in the Game of Thrones. She's like, dragons died in the West, but in the East? Are we sure about that? How can we know that there's no dragons over there? And she makes a good point. It's like, yeah, how could you know? You can't. You silly maesters. How could you possibly know what's over there? They're making assumptions. So I'm definitely with Molander there. And Armin counters, that's, so much of this is just stories about dragons, sailors stories. Why can we trust sailors? Yet Armin, whose name is probably unintentionally similar to Aemon. What does Aemon do when he gets to Braavos and he hears the stories of Dany's dragons? He says, hey, Sam, go get more sailor stories. So, sorry, Armin, you're outranked on this one. There's some merit there. Even Aemon thinks there's something to do here. So, yeah, if all the stories have similar details, you can glean something from that. That's an exercise that comes up several times throughout A Song of Ice and Fire, including in this scene, the A Feast for Crows prologue. That's what Molander sort of pins Armin down on. He ends up saying, yeah, but Armin disagrees that the stories are similar. And Molander says, yes, they are. They all talk about a three-headed dragon or dragons, and they all refer to the same place. Maybe this story is fake, but there is a common element. We know it's real, too. So, of course, I'm more on Molander's side for that reason as well. Something George is good at, though, is loading both sides of a competing mystery with evidence. He's good at making both sides of a mystery compelling. If it's a two-sided mystery, maybe there's 3 or 4 possibilities. He's good at loading all those in there, or loading multiple possibilities by just being clever with the evidence, being realistic with it. Armin and Molander's argument, even though we can pretty easily take Molander's side, it's a very believable type debate. It seems like, yeah, that seems like the type of things people would be talking about. And I used this quote early in the episode because of what I said a little before it, relating to what a subject this would be in terms of, yeah, of course, people in an inn right now, it doesn't matter that it's Old Town, as long as they have this news, as long as the word of dragons has gotten to them, that's what they're going to talk about, right? So it's just such big news, such a big deal. There's dragons? What? Dragons are back? Like, who wouldn't talk about that? It's the biggest gossip item. It would be number 1 Google News trending or what have you, if they had such a thing. So imagine when the dragons were dying out. It would be a similarly constantly discussed thing. Like, who did it? Why are they dying? Did anyone do it? Is this really the last dragon in the world? It's very, very similar conversations, but with a very different outlook. Because one is, are the dragons back? One is, what does that mean? One is, are the dragons gone? What does that mean? Right? So, honestly, with the competing evidence here, with adult dragons and the idea that it's hard to pinpoint why anyone would think magic would end because of a loss of dragons. Like, where did that idea come from? So I definitely, in the beginning here, I lean towards the maesters may have killed the dragons off, or someone did, but I'm not so sure about the reason that we're given. We'll continue to build this case as we move forward. Nina adds, on the case of Silverwing, wasn't young by the time of 153, more than a century old. But still, that's a lot younger than, Vhagar had lived longer than that. Obviously, Vhagar was killed violently, but Vhagar was well over 100 when she died. Balerion died, almost 200 years old, and had really gnarly wounds, right, that were unhealed. So, I don't know. We don't have a lot of data on dragon age lengths. Like Vhagar and Balerion might have been a little outstanding for all we know. We just don't. We do not have a lot of dragons that lived over 100 years to compare to dragons that didn't. So it's possible 100 years is actually about right. But that's not really according to what we've heard. We're more told that it goes longer than that. So, And it's also just hard to know. Like, when did Silverwing die? Did someone never go collect those bones, those valuable bones? Did people not find that somewhere? Even in Fire and Blood, Gildane admits that the reports of Sheepstealer just stop after 136. That's nowhere near the same as evidence that she died around that date. It's just there's no more reports, which is just could easily be a factor of Sheepstealer was too deep in the Vale. The Northern Vale is not very populated. It's still pretty much clan territory. And when we hear not reports of Sheepstealer, that means in common society, the clans, I bet they're still seeing Sheepstealer up until the time that she actually did pass. The cannibal was... You can maybe fudge the cannibal a little more because it's possible the cannibal was very old. So that one is the least likely to have been killed by a human, but the most likely to be old. Yandel reports that the cannibal just vanished after war's end. We just don't know. So that it gives you 20 years of maybe they were wrong. Maybe cannibal was still alive of like runway. Maybe cannibal had gotten too old and was no longer able to fly around a lot. And of course, a dragon that can't hunt is going to pass. 20 years is enough time to account for that. So it's you can squint and see how some of these would fit. The problem is fitting all of them, right? Sheepstealer, cannibal, and Silverwing, like plus Morning Light, like something might be up. So yeah, keeping in mind all that, plus the uncertainty of the Maester's figures is important here. To me, this could also suggest that if they were killing off dragons, they didn't have a goal of just kill every single last one. Because if they were trying to kill every last single one, that might imply that there was some sort of, hey, that will reduce magic in the world type end state. But otherwise, if we're looking at a different motive, like just kill as many of them as we can, because they're terrible and because they're dragons, like isn't that motivation enough? Get rid of the dragons because dragons are bad for people? Maybe that's the reason, which is something we'll explore in greater detail later here. So maybe that's why they weren't trying for total extinction, not just because it didn't produce a desired result, but because it wasn't feasible. Lost dragon lore. The dance didn't just kill most of the dragons, it destroyed most or all of the dragon keepers. Now, here's where we have to remind ourselves that book and show dragon keepers are a bit different. They're not super different. They look a lot different. That's partly for budget reasons. In the books, they wear armor. They're a little more decked out. They're a little more guardian than caretaker, but they're both. And in the show, they're less guardian, more caretaker, but still both. Either way, whichever version, they have a similar place in this whole thing, which is, yeah, they're dragon keepers. They guard them from outside harm. They guard them from each other. They make sure basic things happen. I'm sure they were involved in feeding and some basic rearing and things like that. After all, it's the dragon keepers who were given the order when one dragon is brought from one place to another, meaning a dragon that doesn't have a rider. We've seen an example of that in Fire and Blood. So when the dragon pit was stormed during the dance, the dragon keepers sort of had a last stand. There were 77 of them, and 50 of them faced the mob. And I don't know that any of those 50 survived. And the organization wasn't restored afterwards. Aegon III maybe just didn't care. I mean, he is the Dragonbane. He may not have been so interested in restoring the order because of his feelings on dragons, which are a little more nuanced than we're told. He didn't just hate dragons. He was a little afraid of them, yes, but his reign was 26 years long, and his thoughts on dragons were not consistent the entire way through. So the guardian aspect is important of dragon keepers because without them, well, someone sneaking in and doing violence to hatchlings or young dragons is a lot more feasible. Going to be harder to do when they're well guarded in a non-destroyed dragon pit. They don't even really have the edifice to keep the dragons in anymore after the dance. So this could be related, plus actual caretaking, right? What would happen to our society if just one day aliens came and took away all the people that do childcare? That's bad. These are a smaller group than all the people in the world that do childcare, right? It's only 77 people, but they represent probably 90% of the knowledge of how to take care of dragons day to day, right? And they're just gone. It wasn't just that they couldn't be replaced, that they weren't replaced, rather. It might not have been impossible to replace them. The training, the techniques, the things they knew might have just been lost. It might be it. I'm just gone. Their techniques, their body of knowledge just wiped out on that day at the dragon pit. I think you're looking at all those dragons getting killed in the collapse of the dragon pit, but a lot more than people and dragons were lost that day. I think a lot of knowledge was lost too. It's hard to believe that knowledge wasn't at least deeply affected, if not somewhat wiped out. I think it's nearly certain. Yes, they were guardians, but one of the things they're guardians of is they know how dragons can be harmed. Like, that's part of security, is knowing your weaknesses, right? Like, well, if someone's going to sneak in to try to harm dragons, this is what they might do, because we've seen it before. And B, this is the things they might try, because we've seen it before. And C, this is the things that if they do, we're actually in trouble, because these are the things that might actually work. And we know that because, see, we've seen all this before. These aren't the kind of things they're necessarily reporting to the kings and princes. This is day-to-day, like, management stuff. This is administrative stuff. This is steward business. This is not... I don't think the Targaryens in Valyria knew this stuff either. This was mostly their subordinates. Maybe the occasional Targaryen took a distinct interest and got into the nitty-gritty of how these things worked. But I doubt it was common. It's the same with, like, horses. The nobility own the best horses, but only a few of them are actually, like, horse experts. A few, they know, like, fighting on horses. They know they're expert at fighting from horseback. But as far as breeding and care and all that stuff, the dude that runs the stables for them knows more of that, like, by a mile, with a few exceptions. And so that's the same comparison I'm drawing here. There are probably not many Targaryens that were super knowledgeable about these kind of things. So when the Dragon Keepers were gone, who's filling that in? The answer is no one. And you go another 10 years, you go to Baelor the Blessed's time. So whatever was written down, they still had. Then it got burned, a lot of it. So as we're looking to the loss of people and dragons, we really need to be looking to the loss of knowledge that made all this work in the first place. That's a big part of this, and I think that is somehow related to maybe why the dragons were so weak. Maybe they weren't poisoned. Maybe they just had really bad caretakers. On the other hand, that argument can't go too far, because Dany didn't have any knowledge. All she needed to do was be like, oh, look, they like to burn their meat. At first, she was struggling. Like, she didn't figure that out. Once she figured out that they liked their meats burned, they started gulping down huge amounts of it. She figured out that pretty quickly, because the dragons were kind of like pushing her towards that, right? And they're like, yeah, we don't want to eat that. As a mom, you're like, hell, I got to find something my kid's going to eat. You're going to be putting all your attention on that. So maybe there was just this laziness. Maybe they didn't know that the dragons wanted their meat burned, but the dragons would do it themselves. This is a dragon that laid 5 eggs. How are you going to think this dragon didn't get some nutrition? It's not complicated giving a dragon a goat and letting it do its thing, right? If you don't burn it first, it'll burn it first. So I don't know that we can take this argument too far, but I do think it matters. I think it's included, but I don't think it can be everything. So let's move on. One thing that matters here is who the king was. If we had a different king, we might have had somebody that was more interested in restoring the dragon keepers, making sure the remaining dragons were well taken care of. Just dealing with the problem in general. But we had perhaps the least pro-dragon king of all time in charge during the time where the dragons died out. So this next part, the magic or the egg. George, when writing The Hedge Knight, of all things, included some lore that's relevant to us here. Quote,
"Why would they name it a dragonfly?" he wondered. "It looks nothing like a dragon. Not that Dunk had ever seen a dragon. The old man had, though. Dunk had heard the story 100 times, how Ser Arlan had been just a little boy when his grandfather had taken him to King's Landing, and how they'd seen the last dragon there the year before it died. She'd been a green female, small and stunted, her wings withered. None of her eggs had ever hatched.
Some say King Aegon poisoned her,"
the old man would tell. Whoops, you're muted.
The third Aegon that would be, not King Daeron's father, but the one they named Dragonbane, or Aegon the Unlucky. He was afraid of dragons, for he'd seen his uncle's beast devour his own mother. The summers have been shorter since the last dragon died, and the winters longer and crueler.
Ser Arlan kind of sounds like he could be a radio presenter. in a nice way, complimentary.
So he said he saw it the year before it died, which means the year 152, which would be 57 years before the Hedge Knight. So very young he was at the time. It's very sad, Nina writes, the circumstances here. The Red Keep or King's Landing, it's not like they have some sort of menagerie, right? Like a lot of the dragons aren't just on display all the time, so I'm not really sure what the circumstances are here, but it might relate to Aegon III not really wanting to be around them, so maybe they spent more time outside, aware they couldn't get at people. I'm not really clear on it, but it's unusual, but not inexplicable that someone of Ser Arlan's station, well, he wouldn't have even been a Ser then, of course, could see a dragon while visiting King's Landing. That's not something you can just go do, right? There may have been an event, though, a public celebration. It could have been King Aegon, the future King Aegon, Prince Aegon, future King Aegon IV's betrothal to his sister, who would be married the next year. This is actually a big deal because there hadn't been a brother-sister union since before the dance at this point. So this is in the 130s, and there hadn't been a brother-sister union since Aegon marrying Helena, Aegon II. So that could be when they roll this dragon out for the marriage. Be like, hey, look, everybody, doctrine of exceptionalism, right? The only reason Targaryen incest is accepted in Westeros is part of the doctrine of exceptionalism. So they might be kind of, reminding everybody of that connective tissue. Like the reason the Targaryens can do this is because they have dragons. See, like this one, even though it's weak and dying, it is a dragon. Another suggestion by Nina here is that, well, there were several false Daerons. After Daeron the Daring was killed in the dance, with the circumstances not being quite clear, his body not found, several Prince Daerons popped up after the fact to claim they were him. Now, those false Daerons probably didn't have dragons. If the dragons hadn't died out, this false Daeron wouldn't have even appeared, because it would be a non-starting point. It wouldn't be a start. You can't have this dragon prince who doesn't have a dragon in the era when all the dragon princes have dragons. So that wouldn't fly, literally, and he wouldn't get anywhere militaristically either because of that whole lack of dragon thing. Now, false Daerons can appear in a dragonless or near dragonless society because, well, there you go. You don't have to have that form of proof is removed. Like, well, how can you prove you're Targaryen? You have no dragon. Well, no one can prove that they're a Targaryen via that method anymore. So that's one of the things that it isn't just the strength of dragons that's gone that encourages people to say, hey, maybe we can take down the Targaryens because they don't have that ultra unbeatable weapon anymore. It's also just the identity of Targaryens. It creates more claimants out in the world because it's easier to fake being a Targaryen. The era of fake Targaryens didn't really happen when the dragons were around. It happened after. The Fagons, young Griffs or whatever, and the false Darons and all these others, there were no fake, Visenyas or fake Maegors and fake dragon princes. There were, to be clear, there were people who claimed to have dragon blood, and they were outed or not when the time of dragon seeds was upon us. So, yeah, there was a way to prove or not prove the truth of those words, and that way, that proof died out, went extinct for the most part. Did people realize this? Was this public knowledge when people saw this dragon, Arlan in his case? Did they know what they were seeing at the time? Did they know that this is probably going to be the last dragon? Did they know that they were looking at what would be the last dragon they ever saw at the time? Were they told that? Were they informed that? Like, I don't think they rolled it out because it was the last dragon. Like, hey, everybody, take a look at the last dying dragon. I kind of don't think those were the circumstances, because that's like projecting weakness. Why would the throne do that? Even with Aegon III being not such a fan of dragons, I don't think he's going to trumpet their weakness either. It's like, hey, we don't have dragons anymore. Come get us. So the false Darons is a possibility, like a parade to celebrate victory where they show their real dragon to be like, see, where's the side with real dragons? Even though they're not very formidable, we still have them. That's still meaningful. It's still a connection. A tournament maybe is possible as well, like having a dragon hang out just nearby, just again to remind people that yes, they still do exist, because there might be rumors that there's nothing, and maybe if they don't show a dragon, then those rumors only get fueled. Unfortunately, showing the dragon they did show just fueled rumors probably of, well, that dragon's not very healthy, is it? Green and weak, and the wings are withered and small, and this doesn't look good. Like you go to, it reminds me kind of what we hear about people going to see King Robert. There's a couple examples of this. Someone goes to see King Robert and they're like, ooh, that man, he doesn't look like this powerful, unstoppable Warhammer charisma guy. He looks overweight and red-faced and kind of sad and tired, right? And the same thing happens when Jon sees Jaime Lannister compared to Robert. He's like, well, that looks like a king, even though he's not a good person. That's kind of what I think a king should look like. So I feel like you go to the Red Keep, or you go to King's Landing, and you're expecting to see a dragon, and you see that, and you're like, we're supposed to be afraid of that? That thing, like you said, it's the size of a big dog. Like, a big dog is dangerous, but it's not like all fearsome, like, oh my God, this is going to burn our whole village type fearsome. In fact, it probably looked easier to kill than a big angry horse. So it's kind of you're damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't with these Targaryens. If you don't show them the dragons are still there, then people assume you don't have dragons. If you do show them the dragons you have, people see that your dragons are weak and you can't even ride them or fly them. And yeah, so it must have been very strange. It's like the kind of thing that everyone talked about, but no one talked about to the Targaryens. Like the small council, are they bringing that up? Are you the guy, a master of laws, say, so everybody on the agenda for today, let's discuss this looming extinction of dragons, shall we? Who brings that up? Like you're at the board meeting and you're the guy that's going to bring up, who wants to be the first guy at the corporate meeting that brings up how terribly the company is doing? Like, yeah, we should probably all be thinking about quitting. In this case, it might be like, yeah, so folks, have we considered that the lack of dragons is going to probably lead to civil war? We should think very distinctly and thoroughly about who's going to benefit from this the most, who's going to come attacking us. Like, those are very uncomfortable subjects. And this, again, we got King Aegon III here, a man who just didn't just dislike dragons. He didn't really like life. He was just a sad person. He was traumatized for very understandable reasons. He didn't really like governing all that much. He liked the commoners. He thought that they should have rights and, be taken care of, at least at a basic level. In a lot of ways, Aegon III had a lot in common with Aegon V. and some unfortunate similarities to come later too. Small and stunted, right? That's the basic description of this dragon. It just sounds kind of pathetic, which, if that's the symbol of your house, you've presented the world with a pathetic symbol. It's like, you know what? We're not going to go with dragons anymore. We want to go with little tiny plush dragons. That's our new sigil. Or you want to change your sigil to, I don't know, a cricket or
an apple.
An apple, yeah. We'd all be a deal safer if they thought themselves apples. Yeah, like, it's not intimidating anymore, is it? You're like, look at that sigil. And then they think of the dragon, the only dragon they've ever actually seen in real life is a stunted small thing. And then how are they supposed to compare that to the three-headed sigil of power? And it doesn't evoke what Balerion evoked. I mean, that's night and day, right? People were scared to hell of that dragon. They tested it. They're like, we're going to fight this dragon just to see. And they came up, as you would expect, losing badly without even hurting the thing. Here they'd be like, if we went up against this dragon, it would barely get in the way. Like, I could stomp on it and I could kick it and it would be out of my way. Like, that's all we'd have to do to it. It really is not a problem. I mean, I really cannot emphasize how different this is in terms of, oh my God, that's the biggest thing I've ever seen. It could eat 20 people in 3 seconds versus that thing looks like it would struggle to finish a chicken leg. You know, like it might not be able to defeat a living chicken. Yeah. So notice as well that in that quote, some say King Aegon poisoned her. That would have been the talk of the time. That's the talk of that era during Arlan's time. Notice that no one is saying the maesters did it. At least we're not given a quote from that era that says the maesters did it. The theory about the maesters came from two places. One, as I said, within our own fandom came up with that, just clever and creative. Two, Marwyn in A Feast for Crows. It's not some widespread conspiracy theory that pops up in a lot of different places. I'm pretty sure it doesn't pop up anywhere else in the world. There's definitely a lot of people who weigh in, a lot of other takes we're going to be getting to throughout the episode, but got to keep that in mind. This idea really only has the one source in world at this point. So there were probably other culprits in mind at the time. People didn't start with the maesters, or at least people like Arlan didn't. Arlan didn't tell Dunk 60 years later either that it was the maesters. Dunk is still under the impression of what Ser Arlan told him, which was, a lot of people think the king did it. Right? That's got nothing at all to do with the maesters. Now, sure, maybe the king ordered the maesters to do it. I mean, you could see a little bit of connective, you can imagine a little and have some overlap there, but that's not what we're presented with. But let's not just, let's examine the rest of the quote here too, because there's some other ideas. But I do want to know when the maester conspiracy began in world. Like, who came up with that? I don't think that Marwyn started it. I think he probably got the idea elsewhere, although it is possible it came from him. More on him later, of course. Now, later in his reign, Aegon did try to hatch eggs. We'll come to that, but it should be remembered that, yes, that argues very strongly against him being the culprit for poisoning them if he tried to bring them back later. Doesn't omit it entirely because, again, 20-some years, he could change his mind and be like, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I do want dragons because, well, they give me more authority. The same reason Aegon V reached that same conclusion. He's like, well, I'm a pro small folk guy, and I can't get these lords to do anything. They wouldn't buck my authority if I had a dragon, though. Now, the last sentence there from Ser Arlan is peculiar, and one we definitely need to take a look at. He says that let me get it exact wording here, the summers have been shorter since the last dragon died, and the winters longer and crueler. Well, that's not actually true in part, not in the long run. We can't discount it. Ser Arlan lived 60 years, so he saw a lot of winters and summers, and he slept outside a lot, so he'd be more keen on the weather than most. He didn't have a, pavilion, right? No tents, things like that. But we have a lot of data on winters and summers in more recent times, and it's pretty much a pendulum. If it's a 7-year winter, a 7-year summer, you're gonna have a 7-year winter. 1-year winter, 1-year summer. It doesn't seem to fluctuate too much. So he might be wrong about the shortening of summers, but I do think he might be right about the length of seasons. we have fire and blood, so a lot of those early decades are well covered. But the first noted really long winter was the one that started during the Dance of the Dragons itself, which confounds things a bit. We have dragons dying out during the same time that we have the longest winter at the time, and it's only been beaten by winters that have come after it. And 100 years later, there was another 6-year winter that went through the end of Maekar's reign into the beginning of Aegon's. And then there's the 10-year summer that A Song of Ice and Fire is ending on. The beginning of A Song of Ice and Fire, that is, ends with that 10-year summer's going away as well. And presumably a 10-year winter or something, a magical winter. This one could be different because it's the winter. But you see what I'm saying? Like, we look back on the data we have for like Aegon's reign, Jaehaerys' reign, you maybe find a 3-year winter, but most of them are normal length, 1 year or maybe 2. The really long ones, all the ones on record for being like 5-6 years or more, and there's not that many, but there's 4 or 5 of them, are all dance or later. So maybe it's related. Again, doesn't mean it's the death of the dragons that created it, but there could be some sort of connective tissue between these concepts or these results. So that's pretty noteworthy. It's probably a topic worthy of greater expansion. But it's also too relevant to just simplify here entirely. We have to get into, at least to some level, do dragons increase the level of magic in the world? And how do the season lengths reflect that? How does that push or pull against the data we have elsewhere? Did the dragons come back in part because the magic in the world was sufficient to open that window for them to climb through again? Or was it, the other way around, the chicken and the egg? Now, I say enhance rather than bring, because there's no chance that all the dragons being gone kills all the magic, or vice versa, because there's just too much magic in the world between the period where there were none in Westeros, right? We've got Bloodraven doing glamours. We got Melisandre doing glamours. We've got, technically speaking, Miriam Hasdur did that ritual right before the dragons were born. I mean, like a chapter or 2, right? So that was pretty serious magic, even though it didn't really amount to that much necessarily. Drogo being slightly alive still, but it was definitively magic and supernatural and creepy as heck. It definitely happened before the dragons came back. The comet was there. They hadn't seen it yet because they didn't have like a telescope necessarily, but Lewin did and he saw it. So we got a few other takes from a variety of sources on what they think, and it's curious when we put them all together. A prominent example from A Clash of Kings. Tyrion speaking to the pyromancer, Helene, quote,
The alchemist shifted uncomfortably. Certain spells, ancient secrets of our order, very delicate, very troublesome, but necessary if the substance is to be, all it should be. Tyrion was growing impatient. Sir Jacelyn Bywater was likely here by now, and Ironhand misliked waiting.
Yes, you have secret spells. How splendid. What of them?
They, seem to be working better than they were. Helene smiled weakly. You don't suppose there are any dragons about, do you?
Not unless you found one under the dragon pit. Why?
Oh, pardon. I was just remembering something old wisdom Politor told me once, when I was an acolyte. I'd asked him why so many of our spells seemed, well, not as effectual as the scrolls would have us believe. And he said it was because magic had begun to go out of the world the day the last dragon died.
So Ser Arlan was actually there for at least the seasons and could experience those, but he's not really a guy deep in magic, so he can't really comment on that, nor would he. And here's the problem with listening to these guys. Well, Wisdom Politor wasn't alive when the dragons died out either. He doesn't know, and he might be speaking sort of poetically, because the dragons died, most of them died, when Valyria died, and magic died with Valyria, not literally, but in a very symbolic sense or in a very metaphorical sense, because they had so much magic and then it's just all gone. Whether or not the dragons are directly connected to that or not, they all, for the most part, died too. minus the Targaryen dragons and maybe a few others. Certainly a massive percentage of all the living dragons in the world were snuffed out there. But so maybe there's a connective there. It's like, well, the dragons died at the same time as all those other things, so we don't know really what the effect was, but all that happened at once. So it's just a way to say it. So maybe Wisdom Helene is taking it a little too literally. Either way, there's problems with it because of what we said. However, there's every reason to include his belief in his considerations. However, again, who is Helene talking to? POV dragon expert Tyrion, the guy of all our POVs who knows the most about dragons. And this is complete news to him. He doesn't even have a comment or a reaction to the idea that dragons being back would increase the magic of the spells. He's more focused on whether Helene is BSing him. The concept is foreign to him, right? If he was like, oh, well, actually, yes, dragons in the world would increase the spells. Well, I don't think there's any dragons in the world, but at least I've heard that before. Like maybe Tyrion would be familiar with that concept, but he doesn't bat an eye, doesn't react at all. He just says, yeah, okay, well, whatever. Go do your job. Like I've got no answers for you. So he kind of just shrugs it off. He's more interested in making sure a subordinate isn't lying to him. He's want to make sure that these wildfire fruits actually have wildfire in them. So that's pretty peculiar, right? Tyrion does not notice this at all. There's nothing he says. Our own dragon expert doesn't react to the notion that dragons in the world would bring more like magic or fire magic or whatever.
I kind of was guessing that his lack of reaction means he had read this and had always dismissed it as BS.
Okay, either way.
So he's saying something that's not new to him, but that he's long since just dismissed as like, no, dragons certainly don't do that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good way to interpret it. Either way, it kind of flips us as the same point, which is that, yeah, maybe Politor believes it, but that doesn't mean that it's well supported, and Tyrion may be against it as well. Now, Helene, keeping with the Lannisters here, Helene goes and asks Cersei, says, hey, when you take Dragonstone from Stannis, if you get any dragon eggs from there, let us have them. The pyromancers want the dragon eggs. Oh, boy. Cersei dodges the issue, saying, well, surely if Stannis had any dragon eggs, he sold them to pay for his war. In her mind, she's thinking Summerhall. So even Cersei knows it's a terrible idea to give the wildfire guys dragon eggs. Even Cersei, the one who is perhaps the most in common with Aerys, who loved the pyromancers. That's one thing they don't have in common, Aerys and Cersei, Cersei doesn't love the pyromancer. She's like, yeah, you can burn the Tower of the Hand down, but I don't really like you guys that much otherwise. So, of course, maybe this doesn't need saying, but no one in world has the answer we're seeking. No one actually knows if the dragons bring magic or if the magic brings dragons or whatever. Or if there is someone who knows it. We don't know that they know it. And how could they know it, right? It doesn't seem something that a character could know. It seems unknowable. So what's fascinating to us is how, well, this is a very good example of how George R. R. Martin makes very believable in-world mysteries. Lots of different people have lots of different takes on what this is. And that's true for a lot of things in this world that we don't have definitive answers on. And even some that we do, because that definitive answer isn't widespread, or the proof of it isn't trusted, or also not widespread. And that's a great foundation for theorizing, right? What we do is make sure you have the right details, even if they aren't certain, and build from there. Rather than, what a lot of real world conspiracies are, well, you just kind of start from nowhere. You kind of start with vibes and just go from there. No, we need something, even conspiracy theories should have some sort of basis. So there's a great parallel question here with the others, right? Do they emerge in great darkness and cold, or do they bring it with them? Now, in terms of when they emerge, like return to the world, that's harder to say. That might be different than just, hey, it's cold tonight, let's go. We're already in the world again. But it's undeniable that they bring cold with them. That part we've seen. We've seen Sam and the others like, woo, it's so cold all of a sudden. Oh my God, there's an other. They know why. Like, Will experiences this in the prologue. It's one of the first concepts were introduced. They absolutely bring the cold with them. Now, maybe they can't emerge unless it's a sufficient baseline of cold, but it gets colder wherever they are. And dragons are fire-made flesh. They feel warm, if not hot, to the touch. So that concept is paralleled, if not reverse paralleled here. The others bring cold with them. I guess the dragons bring fire with them. So maybe that's where we should be at with this. Maybe we should narrow it down. Because it's kind of hard to think dragons returning to the world. Well, that's why the others are back. What? The dragons brought back the others on their own? That's kind of weird, isn't it? Are we supposed to think that the dragons are responsible for ice magic? I don't know about that. Maybe the death of the dragons had an impact on that type of magic, fire magic, right? Maybe the lack of dragons reduces the use or potency of fire magic. We've seen some examples of that, like the Quaithe points out the guy doing the fire ladder. He's doing it better now, you know? And she points to dragons as a reason for that. And Quaithe seems pretty knowledgeable. At least she has that gravitas behind her. But she might be making that correlation causation error that is common enough in the real world. Just because you see something that happens at the same time or something that happens just before doesn't mean it's the reason, right? Dragons came and so did magic. That doesn't mean the dragons brought magic. It might, but it doesn't. Neither the word correlate nor causation appears in A Song of Ice and Fire. There's people that know how to use logic, but it's not quite as widespread in our world. And, you know, I know the bar is low, but it's still true. And this thing about fire magic, I don't think that idea flies. I brought it up to sink it, frankly, because check this out. Thoros resurrected somebody before the dragons were born. He didn't know, he wasn't even trying to do it. And it happened. He accidentally resurrected somebody before the dragons were born. So yeah, that doesn't sound like the dragons brought that because they weren't there yet. So it does seem to sound like the dragons were part of what came back, not the reason it came back. Which, all that said, if someone in world believes killing the dragons will end magic, they'll act on that, whether it's true or not. We have to remember that what they believe is what they act on, not necessarily what's true. So we can maybe establish all this evidence and say, hey, it doesn't look like the death of dragons ends magic. It may not be connected at all. The reverse connection looks like it's more likely. But people in world don't necessarily reach that conclusion. They're going to act on their conclusion or their vibes, if calling it a conclusion is too much. So Dany had these instincts, like Nina points out, that to try to hatch the eggs, there was something in her that made her do that. That definitely gets more into supernatural, like her bloodline. She had voices in her head telling her to do it. Like they're calling her mother of dragons in her fever dreams. So yeah, there's a little something going on there. I don't think Aegon III had, you know, the voices of his ancestors parading through his mind in a fever dream saying, kill the dragons. Yeah. Choke them all out. Drown those things. Like the thing to me that might be the best clue for when magic came back to the world or surged, like if you look at it like a stock ticker, like it was down here, then all of a sudden it shot up to here. To me, it would be like the glass candles. They didn't work, then they did. That's the closest thing to an on-off switch I can think of out of all the examples we have here. Because like dragons coming back in the world, well, yeah, but when was the exact moment that happened? Only we know that because we saw Dany do it, but we don't know that that's actually the trigger. That might have been part of the trigger. Hey, magic came back. We know that because Thoros resurrected somebody. The others were in the prologue. Melisandre's been using glamours. Bloodraven used glamours 100 years before the dragons were born. There's plenty of other examples of magic prior to the dragons coming back. So, but none of those things are super distinct, like the glass candles coming on and off again. Like that to me is like, ooh, the moment those glass candles came on, maybe they all switched on worldwide at the same exact moment. To me, that would be, you can't get more definitive than that. However, because that's so definitive, I doubt we'll get it. And who would be able to coordinate that? It's like, yeah, well, at 5:22 in the morning, our glass candle came back on. 5:22? That's when ours came back on. Yeah, I don't know that anyone wrote that down. If they did, woo, that note comparing session would blow some minds. Corin Halfhand, another example of approaching this from another angle. Someone who's completely detached from anything dragon related, right? He said the trees have eyes again. He said, is that because of dragons? Are we supposed to believe the werewoods have eyes again? The heart trees the children are looking through the heart trees again because the dragons were born? Maybe they came back for the same reason. Maybe the same magical on-off switch was flipped, or maybe some magical floodgate was opened and all this stuff poured back into the world of dragons were one of them, you know? Or maybe the others coming back was the trigger. You know, it's like, hey, dragons need to be back because the others are back. You know, we need to fight them. Anyway, one big on switch turning it all on is a metaphor I prefer to the dragons being the on switch. I don't know what this on switch is, but I don't think it's the dragons. But here's another one. Here we go. There's yet another take. I briefly touched on this one earlier, but it's Dany. Probably what she learned from her brother, which maybe take that with a grain of salt, but Viserys probably learned that from their greater family, which might have some relevance. Either way, here it is. Quote.
Magic had died in the west when the doom fell on Valyria and the lands of the long summer, and neither spell-forged steel, nor storm singers, nor dragons could hold it back. But Dany had always heard that the east was different.
There's not even really a mention of dragons. She says neither spell-forged steel, nor storm singers, nor dragons could hold it back when the doom fell on Valyria, right? Yeah, of course, nothing could hold back the doom. The spells had held it back for a while, but they gave out, I suppose. So she's not saying the end of dragons had anything. She's connecting it to the doom. She's not connecting it to dragons, which, yes, the doom killed a whole lot of dragons, but still, that's a different source she's pointing to for the fall of magic. I am curious where she learned that from. Obviously, besides she learned it from Viserys, but did Viserys learn it from their father, Aerys, the Mad King, or from Rhaegar, the guy who was really actually into that stuff? He was reading books and digging into these old prophecies. So I kind of think Rhaegar. But on the other hand, Viserys was just so young. Like, how many conversations did Rhaegar and Viserys have? So I'm not really sure. That's a tricky one because Viserys was so young when so much of this happened. All we know for sure is that Dany was even younger and she never even met Rhaegar. So definitely not that. Now, King Aerys I, around the time just after Ashford Meadow and before Maekar's reign. So this is the era of 209 to 221. That's when Aerys I was king. He discovered a prophecy that the dragons would return. The prophecy was surely far older than the Dance of the Dragons. I doubt it was some 100-year-old prophet or 50-year-old prophet or prophecy. This is something super old, same as Rhaegar, right? That would help explain why it had been ignored and lost in the first place. What's the relevance of a prophecy to say, I don't know, Aegon the Conqueror of Visenya that says the dragons will return? Like, well, what do you mean return? They're here now. So they could safely ignore a prophecy that says the dragons will return because they're not gone, right? The idea of a prophecy that the dragons return would only be of interest to people who are living in a dragonless society or a society that's becoming dragonless. And maybe someone could find that prophecy potentially before the dragons have died, not long before they've died, and say, I see the dragons are dying out now. And this says they'll return. So that's interesting. I don't know where you'd go with that from there, but I do think people would largely ignore a prophecy about dragons returning in an era where they're all over the place. So that means sometime after 131, but before 209. And what was that source? I wish we knew which book it was, right? And maybe if I expand this concept, maybe it does fit. Maybe we're looking at something like the prophecy that said the dragons would return also included a passage about them dying out. So it says, yes, they're going to die out, but they'll also come back. That would be of more interest to someone living in a dragon-y society. Be like, oh, they're going to die out and return. Just they'll return one day is confusing. You might start to think more metaphorically, like, well, like, does that mean Valyria? Like, what are they? That just doesn't really register in the same way when Balerion is walking around, flopping around, whatever he's doing. It's possible that humankind noticed, though. Maybe there was an actual drop-off in magic after the Doom, and they made that association. Kind of like Dany did. Like, oh yeah, magic died in the West with Valyria. Not like the powers became untouchable, that they ceased to exist in this world. It's that the knowledge, the people that had all, like the same thing with the Dragon Keepers, but on a much larger scale. All the people that were permitted to practice magic, all the people that had the ability to, the people that had the resources to, because I'm sure a lot of this magic costs huge amounts of money. That's part of why sorcerer princes were a thing. You don't have a lot of hedge wizards. Don't have the resources for some of these things. Like you need rubies and slaves and awful things to make these grand sacrifices and these rituals and all that. Yeah, like you got to have wealth. Or at least the form of magic that the Valyrians engaged with was a kind that was for the wealthy. There's maybe other types also, but they certainly were on the big spenders end. So, whatever records were in the freehold, obviously that's all gone. And whatever was brought to Westeros and managed to survive may have been burned by Baelor, as I hinted at before. So, but still, there could be an observational angle here. You got the end of the doom. You got 100 years of people looking at things and going, yeah, certain spells don't work as well as they used to. People that actually practice magic who weren't Valyrian. There's definitely some of them, pyromancers, right? Even though we aren't 100% with Wisdom Politor and Wisdom Halline, they're definitely doing things. They're definitely using some form of magic, even if it's something that they've puffed up to make them seem more important. I believe Halline when he says their methods are working better, and the fact that he doesn't know why, it must be magic. I believe that too. And he believes it's dragons. That's where I'm not so sure, but it's happening, even if he is unable to identify the source. Yeah, and we've often used the metaphor that it's like maybe it's a pendulum or like a wave. Magic comes in, and then it comes out, and it's stronger in certain cycles. Just like winter is stronger when we're farther from the sun, right? When the closer to the sun we are, the warmer it is. It's not hard to understand conceptually. Solar panels work better when we're closer to the sun, when there's more sunlight to absorb. Imagine solar panels as magical absorbers. Like the more magic there for them to absorb from whatever is projecting it, the more they can fire back out into the world. It's not that hard to conceptualize, I think. And maybe the dragons dying out had nothing to do with those ebbs and flows. They just aligned with it kind of on their own. And it made harder for the dragon population to recover because it was in an ebb state. The magical forces were in an ebb state, then they were at a nadir. Dragons are magical creatures, there's no doubt about that. So you could see that if, like a creature of warmth being born in winter, they would struggle to be healthy or even survive at all. I'm using that term winter kind of metaphorically here, but in this case, you get what I'm saying. Like, if the dragons are born in a time when magic is weak, then they're weak. You don't have to imagine maesters or other people are doing anything. But again, we are not the type of people to say, oh, we found a reason, that's it. No. There could be multiple reasons. There could be multiple things in play here. So we continue. By the way, if dragons themselves are an engineered magical species, where did the magic come from if it wasn't coming from them? So this is yet another reason that there had to be magic before dragons. It couldn't have started with them. And maybe the Valyrians pushed the idea. Maybe the reason so many people think dragons and magic have this connection like that is because people were told that. The people who were experts in magic pushed that idea for a long time. Maybe even because it was true. I don't know why Valyria would lie about that. I mean, there's plenty of reasons they would lie about lots of things, but there's no obvious motive for this one. Bring that red comet back. And I mean literally bring it back. Think about it for a minute. Did it herald magic, or did it herald dragons, or did it herald both? Did it bring those forces with it? There's a book called The Tugging, or a short story called The Tugging by Ramsey Campbell, an author from back in the day, writing in the Cthulhu world. He's not H.P. Lovecraft, but like a lot of authors, he wrote stories in it. And I might have mentioned this before. I'm pretty sure I have, but this is a good time to bring it up again. The Tugging is a story about a wandering planet, a red planet. So it's kind of like the red star bleeding, that when it's actually a giant eye. It's really creepy. And when it's close, it does that. It is a magical activator. When this wandering planet gets near to another planet, it sort of activates the supernatural aspects on that planet. It turns things on, basically. It is like sending out signals saying, hey, you turn on, you turn on, you turn on. And basically it's activating magic on that planet where it was either very weak or non-existent. That's a model that I think works here. The Red Comet does work as a herald for those things. The Red Comet was seen even by Maester Luwin, if we can believe Bran's vision. Maester Luwin saw the Red Comet even before the prologue. So there's been other red comets, there's been other comets, but those could just be ordinary comets. This could be the special comet. This could be the one that heralds the either literal, just heralds it, it's the symbol of it, or it could be the actual reason. The comet could be emanating all this. And given this story by Ramsey Campbell, we know the concept exists out there in fantasy. I know George has read that. George likes Ramsey Campbell. And a lot of these prophecies from Azor Ahai or from the R'hllorys or what have you says when the Red Star bleeds. They are referring to the Red Star. They know it's part of it. They may not realize when writing the prophecy that it is the cause. The Red Star is the cause. It isn't just a symbol. It isn't just the signal of what's coming. No, this is the reason. The Red Comet itself is the symbol and the cause. So yeah, when you really add up all the things that happened before the Dragon's Return in Book 1, it's a lot. Some major ones. The resurrection of Beric, Mary Mazdoor's ritual, all the things Melisandre did, long before, even before she came to Westeros. And of course, the return of the others themselves. Yeah, there's just so many things that have nothing to do with the dragons coming back because the dragons hadn't come back yet. So it gets increasingly hard to say the dragons are the cause. So I really lean against that. I really lean against the dragons being the cause. I think they're a symptom of the return. They're part of it rather than the cause. But I can understand why people see it this way. They're such a loud, prominent thing. No one else saw the others. No one else saw the comet until it was past the time of the dragons being born. The comets was overhead for everyone to see at the beginning of A Clash of Kings. It's the first thing you see in Cressen's prologue. Now, but it was there before, and just no one saw it. Dragons being back is something that everyone's talking about. It's on every sailor's lips. It's not on every sailor's lips that the others are at the wall or that the dead walk again. People aren't talking about that. Maybe they would if it was more widespread and or believable. But the thing is, people have seen these dragons. Like a lot of people have seen Dany's dragons. It isn't just a few people. Only a few people have seen these others, and most of them got killed. And the few that survived, even some of those don't believe it, right? Even like Cotter Pike was questioning whether Sam really killed, let alone saw an other. Yeah. So even Night's Watch are doubting that the others have been seen. So like that is a big part of it. The dragons are so prominent and talked about that promotes them to cause rather than symptom. In fact, Nina suggests it's possible that the others there's more intelligence behind the others returning who seem to have intelligence, whereas the dragons don't. They come back to the world because they know the dragons were coming. So to them, like, imagine the others have their own prophecies or ways of seeing the future, and they're like, "Oh, dragons are coming. That's our big enemy. So we're coming back first, or we're coming back because of them." So maybe if we don't center humans in this, if we center it around the others, it might look a little different or a lot different. So that's a compelling idea that the others themselves are the ones taking action because of what they see coming in this world, and it may relate directly to dragons, if not other things. So here's a huge question that I have for us all. Where did this idea come from in the first place? I touched on it in the intro. Dragons have been around thousands of years. Where did the idea even come from that ending dragons would end magic? No one's lived under that state of affairs in like 5,000 or plus years, if ever. So who came up with that? Where did it come from? Was it propaganda? Did someone just like get people to believe that and it took? Who though? Why? After the fact, if you're looking at all the dead dragons and seeing the drop off in magic, or at least drop off in visible magic, you might make that correlation. You might think it's the cause. But without that precedent of seeing the dragons dying and going, hey, look, there's less magic in the world, where did it come from, right? Maybe it's the idea that, hey, there's inherent magic in these dragons. So if we get rid of magical things, then the world is less governed by magical things. That might be more of their idea rather than, hey, we can end magic. It just, people didn't understand What's what they heard. They hear, oh, you're going to end magic by ending dragons, and that's just what stuck. But in reality, it was, no, we just want to get rid of magic things, and dragons are one of them. It's right. The Citadel isn't exactly pro magic in other ways either, are they? It's not just the dragon stuff that they avoid, is it? No, they don't really like prophecies. They don't love talk about the others. I mean, some of this stuff is according to Marwyn, and he might be exaggerating a little bit, but it's definitely not something they emphasize, right? Like, Maester Lewin downplays it all. Aemon had sort of downplayed some of it. He had kind of given up on a lot of it. Only near the end of his life had some of it come roaring back. Like, well, actually, we were right all along. We just had a few details wrong, that kind of thing. So, even though there's a sudden sickness and weakness amongst the last generation of dragons, I don't think the motivation is just end magic. I think it's a little more straightforward to think dragons are dangerous. Dragons are fire made flesh. Dragons are a flaming sword held above the world. Take out the prophecy stuff out of that. They're just dangerous. They kill lots of people, and they give undue power to those few who can control them. I think the Citadel, that might be the quote-unquote world they're building, is a world where people aren't under the thumb or claw or talon or wing or dragon breath of those very few. Because that's not a world they want to be under. Because look what the results have been. We've gotten Maegor the Cruel and Aegon the Fourth. And, well, Aegon the Fourth didn't even have dragons, but it's because of dragons that he was in power at the time. The dragons that came before him. So we can't assume that the end of dragons for magical purpose was the goal of the maesters or some other agency or some other organization. But that doesn't mean they didn't have that motivation in general. Like, forget the magic stuff, just kill the dragons. Did you see what Vhagar did to the Riverlands during the dance? How better example do you need? You're like, this one crazy dude just decided to burn half the Riverlands and no one could stop him, even though other dragon riders tried. Like Prince Daemon, you can fully acknowledge that Daemon and Nettles tried to stop this guy, and they couldn't because you can only, the Riverlands is massive. How are you going to guard the whole place? It's like trying to guard the shorelines from the Ironborn. They can always find a spot you're not. And this is one big dragon. They still couldn't track him down. So, like, everybody knows that. The whole Riverlands is like, yeah, we hate dragons. This Vhagar burned. Everyone knows someone who lost a home or family, or it'd be that kind of situation, or worse. You know, like, your farm was burned by Vhagar too. Yep, I get you. Yeah, we lost all our goats. Everybody would have this, either a direct encounter, multiple direct encounters, their families encounters, their friends encounters, all of the above. It's just such a bad look. And this is right before this era where the dragons die out. So it's anything but subtle, right? Everybody knows. Everybody saw it. You know, like, before it was potential, before it was Aegon burned the soldiers on the field of fire. He burned a castle owned by a guy that everybody hated. For the most part, the mass burnings of people were soldiers and people that fought back. It wasn't just a military strategy employed by the Targaryens against other Targaryens. When the people became expendable, they're just a resource to use again for a family struggle. That's a lot worse. It's just a whole different look. It's just the loyalty, the waning loyalty the Targaryens had was plummeting, right? It was waning faster, and it was even more about fear and keeping them in line than it ever was. And then all of a sudden, the biggest tool to keep people in line is gone. Now, what if you're the Faceless Men, right? The Faceless Men. They're obviously anti-dragon, dragon lord. They didn't kill the Targaryens. They said, okay, well, we blew up Valyria, probably. Let's operate on the thinking that they did. That they assassinated sorcerers and caused the doom. But they didn't kill the Targaryens. They said, okay, that's fine. We don't care about them. Just leave that alone. They're in Westeros for whatever reason that didn't matter to them. If you're a Faceless Man, you saw the worst thing that could happen. You saw what happened when there was a Valyria. You were like, okay, the world where Valyria existed and used the power of dragons, not just on one nation, but on half the known world or more. The real life equivalent is like, you're an anti-nuclear activist with a chance to actually wipe out all the nukes on the planet. It's like, if we do this, there won't be any it won't just be that It won't just be like we've encouraged people not to use their nukes. No, they'd literally be gone. Imagine that. Just a blink of an eye, all the nukes are gone. And not just that they're gone, the means to make more. Like the knowledge to make more is lost too. It's like, how did we do that? I don't know how we did that. Just like this. You don't know how to handle dragons anymore because all the people that knew how to do that, they're gone too. So if you're the maesters, Marwyn makes this seem sinister. It's like, oh, the world, the Citadel's building without dragons. Oh, you don't want to do blah, blah, blah. He makes them seem evil. But bro, getting rid of the dragons kind of seems pro-human to me, right? I mean, I can see the good side of that pretty clearly, in fact. I'm not so sure I'm on your side, Marwyn. I'm on his side in terms of believing some of his theories, but even that, there's some problems. Let's get into that a little bit. He may not want to live, I don't think Marwyn wants to live in a world covered by darkness and ice. So he's also operating on, well, we've got this whole ice and fire theory to deal with as well. This prophecy, the dragons being around. Maybe we have a good reason for that. He might be thinking, those fools in the Citadel are trying to kill the dragons. We need those dragons to save the world. He might be thinking on a very high level here with that. I'm not positive of that, but giving him some credibility as I'm criticizing him, I think is worthy because I don't want to push back entirely. Now, people in the Citadel, if what they're asking for is, hey, we want merit and ideas and quality to rule, not who rides the biggest dragon. We don't want that to be who rules society. We want, or which side of the family rules the biggest dragon. So that's why I'm like, yeah, Marwyn, maybe see that side of it and be understanding of why some good sides to getting rid of the dragons here. And if it's for other reasons, well, maybe you should be more clear about that. Now, I think the faith gained an awful lot by the loss of dragons because they were the biggest unearthly power in Westeros before the dragons. And then the dragons kind of, some didn't replace them, but kind of overtook them, right? Aegon adopted the Seven because they're so powerful. He wanted to ease the transition to his rule. Now, the High Septon definitely wields more power in a dragonless Westeros than in one with. It doesn't mean it's every High Septon is the same. Of course, some of them are weaker, but the High Septon had to watch what he said. Remember the High Septon when Visenya and Maegor, there was a High Septon that was mysteriously found dead the next day, and the new High Septon was all about accepting the Targaryens. So that tells you a lot right there. You got to be careful what you say when you're the High Septon, when you're a commoner, period. Anywhere in between. You have more leeway when you're the High Septon, even though your words carry farther and you have more power. But that's part of why, because you have more power. You can't just kill the High Septon. Although you can. You just have to be careful about it. But if we're all being careful about what we say because dragons exist, well, if the dragons don't exist anymore, then the High Septon and the rest of us can be a little less careful what we say. Targaryens can't quite easily push back. Maegor can't just mount his dragon, fly it towards Old Town, and they go, never mind, please stop, don't. There's no equivalent. They go, what do they send a raven and say, stop, or we'll send an army? They say, they send an army. We could probably beat that army, and maybe a lot of other people will join us. It really is a massive, massive difference. Now, Nina says, maybe I'm taking this point a little too far because there isn't any obvious leap forwards by the faith in terms of power. I think I think she's right. The power that they gain is more social and soft. It is a soft power they gain. They don't suddenly have armies marching on their side. It's just they have more leeway, and they may have more leeway than anybody else to say things because they represent the gods, and that's not something you argue against lightly, even when you're a Targaryen. It's just that with the doctrine of exceptionalism powered by dragons, even the faith didn't want to argue against them because their lives were at risk. You can threaten the people who have the mouth to say, be afraid of these people or don't, or think of them as abominations or don't. The faith was in lockstep, at least the leaders of it, during when the doctrine of exceptionalism was in its heyday. But everybody forgot about that book, that pamphlet, whatever you call it, when the dragons were dead, because it was clearly backed by the force of the dragons. And once that force was gone, well, then it really wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. I mean, Maegor flew across the city and burned the Sept of Remembrance, and that was that. I mean, nothing like that is equivalent later. Jaehaerys notably traveled with just Vermithor all the time because he knew that was enough. People would be like, yeah, I don't want to face that, and I know they got 15 more of those back at the Red Keep. So even if they think they could beat Vermithor, which they're probably weighing that and going, yeah, probably not actually. Then they got to fight more of them. Yeah. So it's such an easy, like, yep, we're not doing that. Once the dragons are gone, not only do you have people thinking maybe we can beat them, but you have peaceful people knowing that the non-peaceful people are thinking about challenging who's at the top. So this is where I land on it. Nina points out that, yeah, some of the lords actually gain more power than the seven. They're the ones that actually have the armies, which are now no longer threatened by dragons. Whereas the Faith doesn't really have that, because they had already lost the Faith Militant. The Faith Militant was already gone. So it'd be one thing if they were still around. So Nina makes a great point there. However, I would drill this down one step farther and say it's the most powerful houses that gain the most. And that, in some ways, that's a very straightforward thing to say. But it's the weaker houses that benefited from Targaryen rule because they're safe. Because if anyone comes and messes with their borders, it's as if they mess with the Targaryen borders. The dragons come, say, hey, you broke the king's peace, face the dragons. Without the dragons, the king's peace is not, well, it literally lacks the teeth that it had before. It doesn't have the dragon's teeth anymore backing it. So the lesser lords all of a sudden start sweating and going, Sir Eustace, right? He's like, they might take my land, they might demote me, or I got to cut a deal to try to get my land back and take sides with this rebel. You know, it's these houses that are like, we're on the outs. We're losing our power. We may not even exist in another few generations. They're the ones that are really, they relied on the Targaryens to keep them around. Now that protection is gone. So I think that's what it is. It's the rich get richer. When the dragons fell off, it's the rich to get richer, except for the Targaryens themselves. It's everybody in the number 2 slot is like the gap between Targaryen and great houses was massive when they had dragons. The gap between Targaryen and great houses, it's like you can see the difference. It's like a small step up. They can only lean so much on their ancestry. They can only lean so much on, well, possession is, we have the throne now, so let's keep it. But no one's fooled anymore as to how hard it would be to take it from them. You know, they barely beat the Blackfires. That was obviously later than this, but the Blackfires would never have happened if the main house had dragons and the Blackfires didn't. So yeah, it gets a little complicated, but when you lay it all out like that, I think it starts to make a lot of sense. The ones who were held in check the most by the dragons are the ones that gained the most. Or stood to gain the most. It isn't necessarily the ones who exercised that power. For example, if the High Septon in power at the time of the last dragon dying was kind of a weakling, then maybe they wouldn't have taken so much advantage. But maybe he was kind of a firebrand. Maybe he was one of those guys that was held in check by common sense and realized without the dragons that, hey, he could start pushing. He could start at least see where the new boundary is. What can I get away with now? What will Aegon III, a particularly kind of do what you want kind of king? Yeah, it's a new day. Not only are there no dragons to threaten, but the king on the throne at the time is kind of doesn't care. So any way you look at it, it's enormous loss of authority, of perceived authority, of military strength, all this. And it happened gradually. That's part of what made it super interesting here too, is it didn't just happen overnight. You got these dragons slowly dying out, maybe an adult dragon here and there. Oh, Silverwing's apparently dead now. People aren't talking about the cannibal anymore. The dragons that are there are weaker. The idea that the Targaryens aren't what they were, it has a lot of time to set in. It isn't just a boom. We've got to figure out what all this means overnight now. No, you got like 2 decades of thinking about it, of the whole society, of everyone in Westeros on different levels, whether you're poor, whether you're rich, whether you're noble, whether you're not. It's such a huge subject that everyone's going to be talking about or thinking about off and on for decades. And then it actually happens, and that fires up the conversations again. It's, now this day has come. The dragons are gone. Folks, we definitely rely on your support. We have been doing this for over 10 years, me and Ashaya, and, well, we've loved watching this fandom grow and change and do lots of different things, bring people in, encourage all sorts of creativity and imagination. Yeah, so we're so happy to be here, and like I said, we rely on your support. You can do that a number of ways. Go to our website, historyofwesteros.com, and there's a bevy of options. You can go to Patreon through our website and sign up there, get free, get bonus episodes and voting access and these parallel lives that we're about to start reposting again and making new ones of. Or you can go to Amazon and shop at Amazon. Spend the same amount you would have anyway. Get yourself Amazon Prime or buy some audiobooks through Audible. That's an Amazon company. We have a lot of great book recommendations. The new Expanse series, not new Expanse series, a series by the authors of the Expanse is now just dropped its second book. It's called The Faith of Beasts. The series is called The Captives' War. First book is called Mercy of Gods, and there's a short story called Live Suit. Me and Ashaya and Bran the Builder are all reading it. We love it. A lot of you out there are reading it as well. If you haven't picked it up, it's really, really fun, really excellent. Really cool to talk about. A lot of things to theorize. So that's just one of many ways you can support us. You can go get yourself a copy of that book or just do your regular Amazon shopping, and it helps us out without you getting you charged any more. So, and I've only named a few of the ways that you can support us through our website. Go there, pick whichever one works best for you, or multiple ones, and we'll keep doing what we're doing. We'll keep bringing these almost every week, bringing you news, theories, deep dives, puns, all the above. The Dragonless Dragon Lords. The transition from Dragon Lords to royals with dragon imagery, we've talked about it in a variety of ways from different kings, different reigns. It's usually a particular Targaryen reign that we look at it for. We're kind of doing that here as well. But if you look forward, Daeron I was the first king after the end of the dragons, the first new king once the dragons died out. He went aggro. He was like, it was almost as if he wanted to show everybody that you can't push the Targaryens around, that they're still a force to be reckoned with. He didn't think of himself as a dragon in the sense that like Aerion Targaryen did. At least we don't think so. But he did say that in a metaphorical way to prove it, as a measure of strength. Baelor was the next one, right? 4 years after Daeron, we got Baelor the Blessed. He was super faithful. And then 2 reigns later, after Viserys and Aegon IV, we got Daeron II, who was also very faithful, less zealotous, but very much on the side of the faith. You can see why I made this point about things, a lot of power shifting towards the faith, because the Targaryens were starting to do that. They were shifting a lot of their, hey, we're the arbiters of the faithful, and we have dragons as a symbol, but we don't have dragons, but we still have the faith. Now, Aegon IV didn't really care all that much. He's an example of someone that just did his thing, used power to gratify himself, so he kind of is a exception in that sense. But Aegon III, in many ways, he was the perfect king for this transition, because he wasn't gonna be the kind of guy that was really worried about it. He wasn't like, oh no, we don't have dragons anymore, what will we do? He did eventually see the problem, but it wasn't something that, I don't know, made him paranoid or made him panic. He was, at first, arguably, he wasn't sad to see them go at all, even though he did later in his reign, near the end of his reign, apparently try to bring them back using magic. We'll talk about that in a minute. He wasn't scrambling to save them and projecting this fear of what is our dynasty going to do without them. He kind of just, it's not great, but it's happening. So had he projected that fear, it might have projected fear onto other people. The same kind of peaceful people I was referring to earlier, who they're not going to start anything, but they recognize the state of affairs has shifted, that in a world without dragons, you might have a lot more High Lords starting wars because they're no longer held in check by gigantic flying fire lizards. So it's the elephant in the room, or the elephant dragon in the room. How do you talk about this? You don't talk about it in front of Targaryens. I think that's like, because that's treasonous almost. Like, that's borderline treason. I mean, think about Tanzel and her puppets. Even Baelor Breakspear pointed out that, yeah, that is borderline treasonous. I don't agree with breaking her hand and destroying all her stuff, but Aerion, from a legal perspective, it's hard to completely push back against what his conclusion was there. So think about it in that sense, like, who's going to bring that up? Who's going to bring up Targaryen dragons? Like, is that treasonous? Are you going to have puppet shows about dragons dying? I don't think so. That'd be way more pervasive in this era. I mean, Ser Arlan, would probably have told you something like that. It's like, yeah, you don't do that. You don't have imagery of dead dragons, especially at a sensitive time when the dragons are dying out, right? Yeah. So kind of get that. Whoever Master of Whispers was for Aegon III would be hearing a lot of stuff that it's like, yeah, there again, they're talking about those dragons dying out. I don't know that it amounts to treason, but isn't that where this leads next? Isn't that where when they start realizing that we're not holding them in check, what comes next? Are they going to not be in check and come for us? Yeah, there might be a lot of worry in the Red Keep, especially because they have a king that maybe doesn't worry along with them. He's like, yeah, you guys are worried. I don't care. So it's actually believable. We have a king who sort of treats it like sour grapes, at least for a while, maybe when he was younger. And again, that's why he wasn't all about restoring the dragon lore, finding new sources of information for the things they had lost, for dragon keepers, etc. Just his heritage, he was fine to let it go, even if he regretted it later. But also Aegon III, it represents a broken link to the past. Just as the dragon keepers, maybe so many of them dying, if not all of them, they weren't able to pass their knowledge on to the next generation of dragon keepers. Aegon III was not really raised by his family. He was raised during a civil conflict and by the time that civil conflict was over, his parents were dead and he wasn't very old. He didn't have uncles. He didn't have aunts. Like that, the prior Targaryen kings and queens had all of that. They were basically nuclear family. The two best rulers, Jaehaerys and Alysanne, had a whole lot of that. They had a very active mother, Alyssa. They had Maegor, but that wasn't good. But they had other siblings and then their own children. I mean, it was just a big bunch of Targaryens, and they got to confer with each other. And the quantity of them probably made them all feel safer as a group, especially because so many of them had dragons. And if we move on to the supernatural topic, prior to Aegon III, we can kind of assume, even if the show handled it differently, I think the show probably got the gist of it right, which is to say Aegon had a dream of some kind about the others or something like that. Aegon I. That knowledge was passed down through the other kings. Maybe it skipped over Maegor, maybe not. Either way, Viserys I probably knew it. He reigned over a long, peaceful time. Any of his, very likely Jaehaerys told him before he passed, things like that. However, I don't know that Aegon III was ever told by Rhaenyra. Certainly not by Daemon. He was too young, right? Rhaenyra probably learned it, but when would she have passed it on? She told Jace in the show, probably would have told him in the books. But then after that, she wasn't expecting Aegon to inherit, and it's just one by one, her children die, and we mostly focused on it from that angle as from Rhaenyra's angle, but that was Aegon III's 3 older brothers. They all died on their dragons. Well, Joffrey died on someone else's dragon, but again, it isn't just him seeing his mom get eaten by a dragon, it's his brothers and his dad all died on dragons. All of them, literally. So bad. So not only did he not get the lessons that pretty much all Targaryen kings and queens and princes and princesses gotten just by living amongst the family that had all these shared knowledge, and that was just gone, he was turned off on it. He didn't want to know a lot of this stuff, probably. Like, learning about dragons is probably just puts him in a bad mood, probably recalls his trauma. Why would he want to learn about that? And there's little reason to think, say, Aegon II knew anything about that. Like, when would Viserys have told him? Yeah, like, in the show, Alicent kind of tries to tell him, and he's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't think that happens in the books anyway. Either way, that line is broken because Aegon III dies, and his line doesn't continue anyway. So it's irrelevant, even if it did happen that way in the books for the most part. So that is a big part of this too. The whole, why does it matter that the dragons died out in terms of that? Like, the Targaryens didn't spread that news, but of the people who knew, if any of them did, that is devastating. That's why I think they looked so hard for evidence that the dragons would come back. Not just because it restores their power, although that would be relevant, but because they might know that the world is going to end if the dragons don't come back. That family secret, at least that conclusion, might have passed down, if not all the details. So, yeah. And they're not just talking about Aegon's dream. The idea that a lot of Targaryens are dreamers, that's the kind of thing that would be discussed by Targaryens in a family situation, in a family setting. A lot of us have prophetic dreams. That happens sometimes. Aegon wouldn't have learned about that much either, because, again, he's too young. When would that come up, right? Like, during the Civil War, when everyone's dying, you're like, well, let me pull you aside and have a conversation with you about dreams. Dreams weren't actually that big of a deal during the dance, right? Not in terms of the Targaryens taking action or not. It's those were more a big deal at other times. So the dragons also were sometimes used as a way to, show Targaryen strength, kind of intimidate the Comet or show how strong they are. Aegon didn't like doing that anyway. Even if he had dragons, he probably wouldn't have done that. So he ended up kind of, like we said, like an Aegon the Fifth, where he wanted the dragons because of how strong they would make him in the eyes of the nobility, not in terms of the entire realm, because the commoners were already on his side. Maekar and Aerion, those are examples of Targaryens who projected strength. One was a genuine strength, one was the toxic, bullying, insecure type. Either way, they're trying to sort of project themselves into the space where draconic strength was projected before. Like, well, we can't show you all our strong dragons, so we just show you how strong we are, and you can fear that instead. That was kind of Maekar's angle. He's like, yeah, we can still be powerful war leaders, and they'll respect us for that. We don't have dragons, but if we're really good at what we do, no one's going to want to mess with us. That's the best we can do. That made sense. Aerion just only got half the memo, right? And the ultimate example of this was Daeron the First, right? The minute he ascends to the throne, he's like, we're going to go to conquer. We're going to do what dragons do in human form. And this is a guy who grew up with that as a kid. Like, he's 8, 9 years old, and everyone around him is talking about how the dragons are gone, how the Targaryens are weaker now. He's hearing it, and his dad isn't doing much about it. You can kind of understand why he was just raring to go to prove otherwise. Like, I grew up with Targaryens being talked about as weak, and I am so ready to prove that wrong. I'm so ready to invade Dorne. This will prove it all. For a while it did, and then it didn't. And then it kind of backfired horribly. But he didn't live to see that, because part of that backfiring was his assassination. Taking Dorne, but not holding it. He kind of did prove it, though, right? He kind of proved, yeah, we're dragons. We took Dorne and couldn't hold it. That's exactly what the dragons under House Targaryen did before. So, yeah. Dragonless, but not eggless. Though the eggs went from infrequent to rare, and the hatchlings to, well, I don't know, normal to weaker or rare or less frequent, I'm not sure exactly, there were still plenty of eggs. And despite Aegon III's wariness around dragons, the tradition of eggs in cradles continued for a little while. But here's where it stopped, and here's where there's other things going on. Let's also remember that when the Dance of the Dragons ended, it was a horrible winter that raged for several years past. So there were lots of problems in the realm. At this point, that this anecdote we're about to read is 135. So we're on year 6 of a winter at this point. Quote,
"The trouble might have ended there, with talk, but soon thereafter a series of disasters befell the realm and royal family, each following hard upon the heels of the other, until even men who mocked the gods, like Mushroom, began to question whether the Seven had turned against House Targaryen and the Seven Kingdoms in their wrath. The first omen of the dark times to come was seen on Driftmark, when the dragon's egg presented to Laena Velaryon upon her birth quickened and hatched. Her parents' pride and pleasure quickly turned to ash, however. The dragon that wriggled from the egg was a monstrosity, a wingless worm, maggot white and blind. Within moments of hatching, the creature turned upon the babe in her cradle and tore a bloody chunk from her arm. As Laena shrieked, Lord Oakenfist ripped the dragon off her, flung it to the floor, and hacked it into pieces.
After that, King Aegon banned dragon eggs from the Red Keep. Well, yeah, he took pretty heavy measures there. Maybe that relates to why the last dragon was so visible and so people could go see it like Arlan did, because he didn't want it inside the castle, so maybe he spent a lot of time outside. I don't know. Maybe this is related somehow. Either way, that clearly got reversed, because after Aegon III, dragon eggs were back in cradles again. But winter did break that year. So maybe some superstitious few thought that it was related. He kicked all the dragon eggs out of the Red Keep, and then all of a sudden summer breaks. You know, people are getting very superstitious, or winter breaks rather. So people are very superstitious. You have that quote in there that Shea read about even Mushroom was starting to think that the Seven had turned against the Targaryens, and a guy who doesn't even really believe in the gods. Well, if the people who don't really believe in the gods think that Seven have turned against the Targaryens, well, then you got to believe that people who are a little more sincere with their beliefs in the first place would have been thinking that way for a while. Again, no wonder the Targaryens turned to the faith, started adopting the ways and means and language and dress and all that into much more seriously than they had before. It wasn't just about power. It's also about pushing back against the idea that the gods are against them. You know, like the gods have turned on them. So many bad things have happened during their reign. The Targaryens have had so many losses and negativity that you would think that they would want to push back against this perception of them. Yeah, you can hear the High Septon saying that stuff, right? Maybe the High Septon, this is a time where he feels like he can say what he wants because, yeah, what are they going to do to me? What is it? This Dragon King's not going to send a dragon at me. He doesn't even have one to send at me. Which dragon is he going to send? Who's going to burn Old Town? This last dragon that doesn't even have a name and can barely fly? Like, what are they worried about? Especially in winter. Well, like, they can't marshal some big army to send to Old Town, especially right after the dance. Like, the realm is weak. So I wonder if it's that would have been a particularly good time for the Faith to test the waters as to what they could get away with and what they could say and whatnot. Power can't be held back for long. Power in check is eventually going to explode. And yeah, open preaching against the Targaryen, perhaps unlikely. Yeah, I feel like it just got the bar moved just a little bit every year. But here's another example. This is fun. We get to go back to Dunk and Egg and discuss some more dragony stuff from their perspective. Do you want a cloud in the ear? There are no dragons.
No, but there are eggs. The last dragon left a clutch of 5, and they have more on Dragonstone. Old ones from before the dance. My brothers all have them too. Arian's looks as though it's made of gold and silver, with veins of fire running through it. Mine is white and green, all swirly.
Your dragon's egg.
They put it in his cradle. Dunk was so used to egg that sometimes he forgot Aegon was a prince. Of course they'd put a dragon egg inside his cradle.
So this is well after the reign of Aegon III, who banned dragon eggs from the Red Keep. So like I said, that's how we can be very sure that was undone, because here we go with Egg had an egg in his cradle. So this is 40-ish years gone, basically. Dunk, again, he's a personality entirely of the post-dragon era. That's a point that is made early in the Hedge Knights, so people get their bearings as to when the dragons died out. And that's an important milestone, right, to keep in consideration. So he's not someone that lived through both sides of it. Dunk isn't, obviously. Arlan did, but barely. He was so young. What we really need more of are takes from people who were alive and adults before the dance, survived it, and then lived for quite a while afterwards. So they could maybe weigh in on the seasons, if that was really a thing, if there was any evidence there, and was there any other differences between the dragons, right? What was the vibe like? Am I right that just it was the talk of all the pubs and taverns all the time? And what was the vibe? Was it fear? Was it curiosity? Was it like a sort of a giddy excitement for the fall of the top house? Like, people do kind of get excited to see, the rich fall, like the powerful. People get excited about that, even though it might cause problems for them. You like to see the high and mighty fall when they deserve it, or because they've had it coming, which is kind of the same thing, I guess. This is some schadenfreude, I guess. But yeah, there would have been a lot of people eager to see what would happen and or worried at the same time, like a little of both. So we mentioned that, yeah, Aegon III was against dragons. He kicked them out. But later in his reign, some things changed. And this is very Aegon V-ish, and I think you'll agree. He sent off for 9 mages from Essos. Not sure where in Essos. And it was his brother Viserys' idea. So it's like a milder version of Summerhall, because Aegon V wanted to change laws. The nobility was resistant. Same thing here. Aegon III wanted to change laws, but the nobility was resistant. Both of them were very pro-commoner, and that's a big part of where they wanted those changes to be focused on. They wanted to promote the commoners more. They wanted to raise the floor, so to speak. And there was some sort of ritual and some kind of debacle. We're not sure what. Almost certainly not the kind of debacle of Summerhall. It feels like that wouldn't be glossed over if so many people died. To be fair, Summerhall sort of gets glossed over a lot, but the language is a lot more severe about it. It's clear that it was some sort of tragedy. This is a debacle. Debacle is not tragedy. Tragedy means people died. Debacle does not. Debacle just means this was just... It could just mean it was stupid. It could just mean it was ill-conceived. It could just mean it made them look bad. It could mean all the above. Yeah, it just could make them looking bad, I think is probably the best way I think we can take away from this without reaching too far. But it didn't, it was a failure, bottom line, no matter what, any way you look at it. And you wonder if, what other Targaryens thought about that, whether that just made Daeron the First, who would have taken over as king not long after this, because this is probably near the end of Aegon III's reign, and Aegon III died of consumption. Daeron the First seeing this fail too is just one of many things that he just got in his head. The only thing that's going to work is just me leading an army into Dorne and proving everybody that we're still strong. So let's talk about who or what or who done it. We've laid out a lot of evidence, a lot of different details, a lot of timelines. Let's get into the possibility that it was intentional by some body. We've talked around it. Let's get more specific. 4 basic possibilities. The 3 who's and 1 what. The what is grand supernatural forces beyond human control. That's the whole idea with the tides flowing in and out, like magic flowing in and out like tides, or like cloud cover. You know, sometimes it's cloudy day. On cloudy days, the magic works well. On some days, maybe you guys are familiar with the Dragonlance series. In Dragonlance, there's 3 moons. All 3 moons are magical. Whichever moon is closest to the planet at that time, that magic works best. There's white, there's red, there's black. So when the red moon is big in the sky, the red magic works the best. It's not an old fantasy concept. It's not hard to understand either. It makes sense. It's not something that George invented, nor Ramsey Campbell, nor the red comet concept. It's just magic having a governing body. Maybe that body is a comet. Maybe it's a moon. Maybe it's a sun. Maybe it's some giant hole in the ground, a chasm that leads directly to the center of the earth. Who knows? There's lots of creative ways to express this. And that is one that's the hardest for us to get at, but there's evidence it could be something like this, partly because the whodunits all have some flaws too. Now, we can always have multiple possibilities, so none of this gets discarded easily. So here are the 3 who's. The human motivations, why and what. The Citadel, okay, we've kind of touched on that. That's actually referred to directly in the books by Marwyn. The faith, I talked about how since they gained the most from the end of Dragons, maybe socially and maybe politically, you can look at them as a possibility. They also ideologically are opposed to the dragons, and they're connected to the Citadel as well. So if the Citadel is anti-dragon, maybe this is a sort of a faith/Citadel cooperative effort. And behind them both is House Hightower, who represents the nobility in this scenario, which Nina pointed to. A lot of the nobility have a lot to gain by seeing the end of Dragons. House Hightower will be one of them because it's the higher nobility, the more powerful the nobility, the more they gain from the loss of dragons. However, it's less easy to believe some sort of coordination between powerful noble houses with regard to the end of the Dragons. It's already hard enough to believe it with the Great Northern Conspiracy. Now, I believe a lot of lords got gathered to do what's best for themselves right before Aerys went completely full crazy. That isn't necessarily a conspiracy to unseat him. It's maybe just them planning for the inevitable. That aside, you don't have to assume that a conspiracy is only by one group or the whole group is involved, right? That's especially hard with the nobility. There's so many noble houses, like just the great houses got involved, or maybe just Hightower and a few of their vassals, who knows? But the Citadel And the Citadel and the Faith are a little bit more of a closed organization than the nobility. So, yeah, maybe one or two noble houses, but it's hard to imagine like dozens of them being involved in this. And then third, but certainly not last, is the Faceless Men. They obviously are very capable of killing. They're the most capable, perhaps, of murdering dragons, murder in general. They also have ideological opposition, just like the maesters do. Their all of them have ideological opposition, really, but theirs is perhaps the most severe. Maybe you could say the Faces, but the Faceless Men, I think they have more hatred of dragons and Valyrians than the Faith do. More ideological opposition there. It's actually hard to top the Faceless Men in that regard. Born in their slave minds. That's rather straightforward. Anyway, it's a compelling possibility to put them very high on the list. So the Faceless Men are generally for hire, right? This is their own thing, probably. Again, I point to the fact that they just kind of left the Targaryens alone, which is a little suspicious, maybe? I don't know. But they definitely have to be included in this conversation, any way you look at it. In the case of the Citadel and the Faith, yeah, they could be working together. Don't know about that here. I don't think the Faceless Men would be working with anybody else here unless they were hired to do so, which we don't think is the case because of their straightforward ideological opposition. The problem with comparing that to now, like, did the Faceless Men kill the dragons before? Do they want to do that now, though? Because Dany's anti-slavery. She wants to save the world from the others potentially. I'm not even sure if they're aware of that part. But they definitely know about the anti-slavery part. She is very famous for that already. Like, the smashing the slave trade is the talk of Western Essos, right? She's just completely upended the economy amongst the rich. The Faceless Men are more than aware of that, partly because they have a connection to the Iron Bank. They would know anyway, though. So there's a lot of the most powerful organizations in the world are involved in this or potentially involved in this. They all have their own very straightforward reasons to be involved and potentially some other reasons that we're not aware of. And these reasons are out there. They're obvious, I think. So that's why it's not too hard to imagine some of these groups working together because they all know each other's motivations. They all have some of the same motivations. Like, yeah, we all benefit if the dragons are gone, right? Don't we all? This group of us in this room right now? Like, yes, that's why we're here, because we're very obviously people who benefit from the dragons being gone. I don't know who was in this room at that moment, but we've given you a lot of candidates here. Actually, I mean, killing off the dragons before, like, imagine the Faceless Men wanted to kill the dragons off. Well, that would have been really difficult. Now they can. But that still leaves us with the confusion of, well, the Targaryens are still there. If they wanted to get rid of the dragons, couldn't they have just killed the dragon riders? Maybe that's worse. Maybe that just means the dragons are running rampant, and I don't know. I don't know how they think. They're a weird religious death cult. And there's a lot we don't know about them still. But we know enough to very much include them here. Hey, let's talk about Marwyn a little bit. His conspiracy stuff has been off and on in this episode, but we should get into more detail here. One peculiar thing he says is he tells Sam, maybe it's good that Aemon died at sea on the way here. Otherwise, they'd have had to kill him. It's a weird thing to say. Sam is shocked they'd kill anyone, let alone Aemon, which brings us to Marwyn's great conspiracy thesis. Who do you think killed all the dragons the last time around? Gallant dragon slayers armed with swords? Pfft. The world the Citadel is building has no place in it for sorcery or prophecy or glass candles, much less for dragons. Ask yourself why Aemon Targaryen was allowed to waste his life upon the wall, when by rights he should have been raised to Archmaester. His blood was why. He could not be trusted, no more than I can. So that's compelling. You like hearing that. That moment when you first read it is like, yeah, ooh, whoa, what is this? This is cool. And it's near the end of the book, so it feels kind of climactic, and it is. But there's some flaws here in his story. As we've said earlier, I seriously doubt the maesters killed Silverwing, Cannibal, or Sheepstealer, let alone all three. So he's like, who do you think killed the last dragon? Well, the maesters didn't kill them, I don't think. If Marwyn said, who do you think finished off the dragons? Or who do you think killed the last few dragons? I'd be more likely to align. That aligns with what we've been saying. But he says gallant dragon slayers with swords, like that's ridiculous, and it is. But a maester killing the cannibal is pretty ridiculous too. Probably, right? I mean, again, maesters can poison eggs, but a 10-year-old child could kill a hatchling. That doesn't take a gallant dragon slayer with a sword. And his take on Aemon, that's just not accurate, is it? Not all of it, anyway. Aemon chose to take the black to help his brother's reign be more secure. Where does the not being trusted by the Citadel part enter into all this? Did he take the black because he thought the archmaesters would kill him otherwise? I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, but that's the only way I can really reconcile those two statements. So I doubt it. I doubt it, Marwyn. While it's possible Aemon had other motivations for taking the black, those reasons would be maybe prophecy related. Like, hey, the front lines of the supernatural war to come is up here. This is where I need to be. That to me is a lot more likely than, well, if I go to the Citadel, they'll kill me. So, if Aemon saw that danger, why didn't he say it to Sam? Why didn't that come up? Why was he so eager to go there? Like, oh, that place where they're going to kill me? It's been 50 years. They don't care about that anymore. It doesn't even come up from his perspective. He doesn't even think of it. Doesn't say anything. Like, why wouldn't Marwyn warn Sam, don't bring up prophecy or they might put poison in your oatmeal? Why did Aemon warn Sam of that if it's true, or if it's something that Aemon himself was worried about? So I think Marwyn is putting words in Aemon's mouth, or maybe going a little farther with his conspiracy than is warranted. He's also talking about things that were long gone by the time he was born. Like, if he isn't to be trusted, if the other archmaesters don't trust him, then how did he learn these inner circle secrets in the first place? Like, who taught him? Who told him? Who gave him this information? He obviously didn't learn it firsthand. He wasn't around when the dragons died. Maybe he wasn't always so mistrusted. Maybe early on, like, he was inner circle, and then over time they realized he couldn't be trusted. Aemon wasn't trusted from the beginning because he's a Targaryen, maybe. So yeah, they're both black sheep, not gray ones. Aemon especially, black brother and all that. But now, it's not necessarily a flaw this isn't necessarily another criticism of what Marwyn says, but I wonder which archmaester he thought Aemon would be. Because there's not just generic archmaesters. Each archmaester is of something. Archmaester of black iron, archmaester of gold, archmaester of... So would it be Valyrian steel? Is that the one they would put him as? Well, if they're trying to control the type of information that comes from that office, if they're trying to suppress magical knowledge, they would put a yes man, somebody who doesn't believe in magic, in that position. It's like all the time we see people in really high political office appoint someone incompetent or hostile to that office to run it in order to destroy it or to usher in its slow downfall. So yeah, I wonder, like, they wouldn't have... How much damage could Aemon have really done? Like, why would they kill this guy? He's 102 years old, and like, what really are his words really that dangerous? I mean, maybe too many people would believe him, and it could send the Citadel spinning. Like, if he starts talking about the others and all that other stuff, and yeah, but Sam's going to do it, right? Or is he? I don't know. I don't think Marwyn's wrong overall, but you can clearly see that he's a little too far in some of these directions. Some of these things just aren't supported. Maybe he's exaggerating a bit, but we can't push it aside. He's got some truth that he's speaking to, even if he's not 100% right. How to kill a dragon. So we have some motives, we have some culprits, but the how. How do you actually kill the dragons? How do you keep it a secret? What's the means? All that. So if we go through our three main possibilities, the poisoning of the dragons themselves is perhaps possible. Maybe that's how you kill the bigger ones. Maybe you really can kill Sheep Stealer and the Cannibal and Silverwing by feeding them poisoned sheep or something like that. Yeah, maybe that really works. I don't know. It could. I can't say no. I can't say that would never work. Why not? Why would I be able to say that? Maybe it does. So if there is a murder method that works, they might be trying for that. And I think poisoning the eggs is a little more straightforward. I mean, eggs are obviously a little more fragile. Poisoning a hatchling, I don't think poisoning a hatchling explains why that one hatchling was so aggressive and violent that it bit someone. We don't have any example of that. In fact, that might be the only example of a dragon harming a Targaryen that wasn't encouraged to do so. No dragon has ever harmed a Targaryen that's trying to ride it, that we know of, unless it's one that wasn't theirs. Like, obviously, Syrax harmed Joffrey by kicking him off. But that wasn't, that was somebody riding the wrong dragon. Either a riderless dragon hasn't harmed any Targaryen. They've harmed plenty of dragon seeds. They've harmed plenty of other randos. But actual Targaryens, there was nothing on record of that. So that is odd. That makes the one case of the white dragon thing attacking Laena a little unusual. But by itself, you can't go too far with that one example. So I think poison's the only thing you can get away with here. I can't think of another method that wouldn't be just obvious. You know, like, well, that dragon had his head cut off. Someone did that, you know? Poison's the only thing that you could get away with that wouldn't be traced, wouldn't be tracked, wouldn't be... Because the maesters would be the ones giving that autopsy. They'd be like, yeah, no poison here. The Faith, I feel like that's the only thing they have going for them too, and they're not the ones who administer it, which is why I would guess that if the Faith were involved, it was alongside the Citadel, because who's going to dose the dragons with poison? Not the wandering septons, right? How are they going to do that? They don't have that knowledge. They don't have that access even. Like, yeah, can I go hang out with the dragons for a minute? Why do you want to do that? Oh, just because I just like dragons, man, you know. But don't watch me while I'm there. So if it was the what rather than the who, if it was ebbing magical forces, that helps explain a lot. The dragons would be easier to kill. If there's less magic in the world, they'd be weaker. That would explain their weakness, or a lot of their weakness. Maybe there's no human involvement at all. Maybe it's entirely that. That's not something that's easy for people to accept. So they blame other people. It has to be a human answer here. It can't just be magical forces. Our fandom struggles with that as an answer too, frankly, because it isn't super satisfying. I don't love it as an answer, but I think it could be a partial answer. I'm cool with it being a partial answer, but I feel like there has to be more to it. If it's easy for faceless men to kill dragons, at least adult dragons, then what's Jaqen still at the Citadel for? Why is Jake and Hagar hanging out there looking for that Death of Dragons book? Maybe that's not why he's there. Then why is he there? And why was that book mentioned to us? Why did Tyrion bring that book up if it's not relevant? If it's not relevant to the Faceless Men, maybe it's relevant to somebody else. Maybe Sam. I mean, someone else at the Citadel, I guess, or someone else who could be getting access to the Citadel. Euron? I don't think Euron wants to kill dragons. He wants to have one of his own. So yeah, what is Jaqen doing there if he's not trying to get that book? And if dragons are easy to kill, well, maybe they're not. Maybe he needs to learn how to do that. He's like, well, I got a mission to go kill 3 dragons, but I need to learn how to do that first. I don't know how to kill dragons. I don't want to just stab them, because then it's going to be seen that they were stabbed, and maybe that's not good enough. I mean, Drogon's too big for that now. I don't know that a faceless man could accomplish that task. Maybe they could, make themselves look like one of the dragon keepers with a glamour, with their face changing ability. Dragon wouldn't be fooled though, would they? We already know that. We've seen Arya didn't fool Casso the seal, even though she looked extremely different, because animals have too good a sense of smell. Animal senses work really well. As an aside, by the way, that's an interesting connective tissue between skin changers and faceless men. You can't, human eyes can't detect those kind of glamours and stuff, but noses can. A skin changer, a human using the nose of a wolf or a dog or something like that would be able to tell the difference. So that's kind of cool. I don't know if that's certainly not relevant here. It just kind of literally just occurred to me in the moment here. But in conclusion here, my friends, King Aegon III lived another 4 years after the death of the last dragon. He died in 157, the last dragon in 153. It may be that those last 4 years of his were when his attempts to bring the dragon back were the most sincere, or he tried the hardest, but we can't be sure about that. It would be, the absolute talk of the realm, as it had been before, maybe more so. Once they died, boy, that talk was big. Boy, that talk was loud. And again, that is, like, how did they handle it? Did they toll bells? Like, the bells toll for the death of a king. Do they toll the bells for the death of the last dragon? Or is that something they kind of just want to, like, let that pass by unnoticed, even though everyone's going to notice it anyway. You don't need to draw attention to that. Everyone is going to pay attention to it regardless. Every tavern and market square would gossip about this, realm-wide, if not worldwide. I mean, the rumors would be going everywhere. People would be hearing about it in Ash High. People would be hearing about it in Yee, Lang, like the wildest, farthest away places. It's worldwide news. This is global news. It'd be funny to people who are hearing the news that maybe still have dragons really far to the east or something like that. Like, yeah, we got dragons. What do they mean extinct? Bah, suckers. Don't they know how to take care of their dragons? Or maybe they're more knowledgeable and they're like, yeah, well, they didn't handle the ebb and flow properly of the magical tides. We do. We know our magical knowledge wasn't destroyed. Our dragon keepers weren't wiped out. Baelor didn't burn our books. It's funny to think, too, that amongst all the rumors told in these taverns and elsewhere, that maybe even the truth was spoken unwittingly. Like, someone might have the right answer or combination of answers. They just no way to verify it. And again, this is the realm that Daeron the First, the young dragon, inherited. A realm where everyone's talking about the death of the dragons. Everyone's questioning whether House Targaryen is still powerful enough. So you could tell his actions were very geared towards speaking to that. Now, here's something else to consider going forward. Maybe a last couple of questions that have no answers, or at least don't have answers yet. Dany's dragons might all pass during the story. They may all three die. Either way, they are, again, kind of the new last dragons. Maybe only one of them will survive. Maybe it will grow weak as magical forces shift. Maybe we'll get examples from them that teach us more about these other last dragons, these nameless last dragons that maybe one day will have a name. Fire and Blood 2 may give that to us. Maybe we'll see one of Dany's dragons killed by poison sheep. And that will be like, oh, that is possible. That can happen. That maybe helps us explain how the other dragons were killed, the adults. The younger ones, it's easier to figure out. I mean, it's not so hard to kill a younger dragon. We're not looking for answers there. We're only looking for whether it actually happened. But it's one of many possibilities that could come up and give us more clues as to what happened during this end of the dragon's phase that began 150-ish years before Song of Ice and Fire. The dragonless times of Westeros. The time when things were different. The time of Dunk and Egg that lived in the middle of it. They didn't realize how different it was because it's hard to do anything but see your times as normal because they're the only experience you have. But we can look at these different eras and see these huge differences and draw many fun conclusions and many fun theories. And we'll have to see what comes next in this saga of the many whodunits, the what done it, and all these other mysteries associated with the last dragons. Trivia question was, how many eggs did the last dragon lay? 5. It was not 0, not a trick question. The last dragon did lay 5 eggs. And those eggs did not hatch. Those were apparently weaker eggs, shriveled, maybe lighter. So maybe not some of the eggs that ended up with like on the sun to buy the Sun Chaser. You know, Alyssa Farman probably aren't among the 3 of her 5, or those 5 were not among her 3. Came from her 3 rather, and etc. So these might have been notably different looking just because they came from this weaker dragon. But we don't have certainty on that because we haven't seen. These are the 5 that came from that. We just don't know. But it'd be interesting to discover that one day. See, hey, these are shriveled dragon eggs that are turned to stone. Those must be from that last dragon. We do have an episode on Daeron the First. We have an episode on the Comet. We have an episode on many episodes on Fire and Blood that would be related to this off and on. We, of course, have Valar Rereadus for Sam chapters, the Sam Marwyn chapter. We did an episode that referred to Jaqen's presence, the Faceless Man's presence in that final scene where Sam is talking about everything he saw north of the Wall, while Marwyn is talking about dragons and killing dragons and all that, all right in front of a Faceless Man. So that's pretty important too, right? A lot of these things bleed into other areas. So check those out and do your own thinking and questioning and let us know what you think. I'm always curious to know what you guys have for us and whether it differs or agrees. This is part of the fun. Thanks to Nina for her add-ons and her great thoughts for this one. Helped me work through some ideas and had a lot of great thoughts of her own. Thanks to Joey and Jesse for our music. We have lovely theme music that plays in various parts of our episodes, sometimes at the end, always at the beginning. And thank you to Michael Klarfeld for the maps you see behind us and in many of our episodes, and including our video intro. Michael Klarfeld's work can be found at claradox.de. That's K-L-A-R-A-D-O-X. Claradox. Yes, Claradox. Yeah. It's down in the description. Don't listen to me. Just find the button there and click on it that way. On behalf of Ashea, I'm Aziz. We'll see you next time for more. You know what to do in the meantime. Valar Rereadus.